Kevin communicated with a flock of pterodactyls who seemed to know the location of Elohie's mysterious arena. But when they arrived, it turned out they were in the crater of a volcano, and it was about to erupt. Gaming prodigy Walter led them across the fracturing floor of the crater, thinking he knew the way out. But Walter was mistaken. Now Kevin, Evita, Pamela, and Walter were trapped against a wall with the ground crumbling into lava pits at their feet. Kevin, Evita, Pamela, and Walter stood against the sheer wall inside the crater of the volcano. The floor of the crater continued to fracture and splinter, with more and more pieces dropping away into the magma that swelled up from below. Walter looked like he was about to cry. He had been sure the dark hole he had been guiding his friends toward had been an exit. But when he got closer, he realized it was only a shallow overhang. Walter was certain he had just led his friends to their doom. "I'm sorry," he gasped out, trying his best not to burst into tears. More of the ground broke away under their feet, and they were forced to press their backs to the wall, standing only on a narrow ledge of stone as just below them glowing magma sent up fiery bursts of heat. Kevin set a steadying hand on Walter's shoulder. "We're not dead yet, Walter," Kevin told him. "Don't give up hope. Don't stop trying." But looking into the preteen space, Kevin could see Walter's brain had shut down in despair and panic. He was still only a boy. Kevin knew this was one of the moments when he needed to step forward as the guardian of the test in order to protect his charges. Kevin ignored the baking heat and took careful stock of their surroundings, looking for a logical solution. The walls of the crater were smooth as glass and several stories tall. Leveled warrior Pamela might be able to climb or leap up them, but certainly not while trying to carry any of the others. As always, Kevin had lost his leveled powers when he came to the upper realm. He couldn't even climb out himself without those skills. Kevin also realized that if Pamela could reach safety and find a rope to lower it to them, it would take far too much time. The pterodactyls who had brought them to the volcano, mistaking it for the arena Kevin and the kids sought, were far out of range. Kevin couldn't call them back to save the stranded group. But that got Kevin to wondering if there might be some other creature nearby he could reach. He turned his attention to the shallow depression in the crater wall that Walter had mistaken for an exit. How had it gotten there? Was it natural, or had something created it? As Kevin looked closer, he could see signs of digging, but what curious signs they were. It appeared whatever created this depression was huge and had 8 legs. Kevin couldn't think of what kind of animal it could be, but the upper realm was full of strange and fantastical creatures. More rock crumbled from under their feet. He had to take the chance. Kevin ignored cries of fear from the kids and the part of himself that wanted to panic along with them. He reached out with his mind and called any creatures who might be nearby to come to their aid. He felt something responded, but it was a strange being who replied to his summons, unlike anything he'd communicated with before. "What's that?" Evita suddenly shrieked, pointing to the rising lava levels below them. As Kevin watched, a weird gray beast breached the surface of the lava, rolled and disappeared again. It had been plump and disproportionately short relative to its girth. Was that some kind of volcanic whale? Pamela wondered. "Couldn't be," Walter replied in a shaky voice. "It had legs. 8 of them." "8?" shrieked Evita. "You mean like a spider? I hate spiders." "No," Walter assured her. "The legs were short and stubby, kind of like a bear." Suddenly, Kevin knew what the animal was, as fantastical as it seemed. It's a water bear, also known as a tardigrade. They're some of the toughest animals in existence. They can survive extreme pressures, air deprivation, radiation, dehydration, starvation, being sent to space, and of course, extreme temperatures. The kids exchanged doubtful looks. "Then shouldn't we have heard of these tardigrades before?" Usually they are micro-animal, almost too small to see with the human eye. But here in the upper realm, things are different, including the size of the tardigrades. I'll see if it can help us. Kevin reached out with his mind again and communicated with the tardigrade. He conveyed the imminent danger they were in and their desire to leave the volcano crater. He just got back a sense of confusion from the tardigrade. The animal didn't seem to understand the problem. Apparently, tardigrades assumed all animals were as tolerant to extreme conditions as they were. Kevin patiently explained the differences between their two species as the lava levels continued to rise. The kids were gasping from the heat, and Kevin had to fight off waves of dizziness. Finally, the tardigrade seemed to be convinced his new friends were in danger of dying at any moment. It expressed its willingness to help. Kevin sent a question to it about the shallow depression that Walter had mistaken for an exit. Had the tardigrade created it? Could it tunnel out through the side of the volcano so they could escape to safety? Kevin got no response. The kids looked at him with big, frightened eyes. Kevin was almost ready to look for another way out when the giant tardigrade heaved itself out of the molten lava and up onto the narrow ledge that they were perched on. The tardigrade was the size of a grizzly bear, with a blind, gaping maw and 8 stubby legs ending in claws. It paid no mind to the magma that ran off its body like water off of a duck's back. Kevin and the kids scrambled back, crowding each other on the ledge to avoid getting splashed with the steaming lava that was dripping off the odd beast. The tardigrade didn't communicate with Kevin at all, but threw itself at the shallow depression, digging furiously with 6 legs while the rear 2 drove it forward. Rock and stones flew from the depression. Kevin shielded the kids from the flying debris with his body, one arm shielding his face. "Kevin, the magma is rising again," Walter warned. Kevin looked back. At the end of the line, little Walter was half suspended over the boiling lava due to the lack of space. Pamela had him firmly by the arm, but his position was still precarious. The magma was now only 5 feet below the ledge that they stood on. Kevin looked back into the deepening hole to see how much further the tardigrade had to go to reach the outside. Instead, he saw the tardigrade charging back toward him through the tunnel that was barely bigger than itself. Kevin jerked away just in time to avoid getting run over by the 8-legged beast. It leaped past Kevin and dove back into the lava with another splash. Kevin looked back down the tunnel. He could dimly see daylight at the other end. The incredible giant tardigrade had dug through dozens of feet of solid rock in mere moments. It was an incredible sight to see. There was no time to waste. "Come on, let's go," Kevin commanded, stepping aside to allow Evita to squeeze past him first. Pamela followed after, setting Walter back down on the ledge now that there was more room. "Kevin, I'm so sorry." Walter looked up at Kevin with begging eyes. "I was so sure that there was a way out of here." "It's okay, Walter, but there's no time for this now." Kevin motioned for Walter to follow the others. "I just wanted to let you know, next time I'll look before I leap," Walter assured Kevin. But just as he said the words, the ledge crumbled under Walter's feet as he went plummeting downward. It was only because Kevin had honed his ordinary reflexes to the highest degree that he was able to shoot out a hand and grab Walter. He managed to stop Walter's fall just inches above the fiery lava. Walter screamed in pain and terror as the lava suddenly surged so high that it singed the sides of his shoes. Kevin hauled him up and into his arms before running down the tunnel. Kevin glanced back. The lava surged higher, rising by the second. It flooded the ledge that they had just been standing on and flowed into the tunnel. Kevin raced faster, feeling its heat on his back. Walter's sturdy weight and the extreme temperatures tried to slow him, but Kevin pushed himself harder. He could see daylight ahead, but as he watched, something blocked the exit to the tunnel. Kevin and Walter were trapped. Kevin made contact with a giant tardigrade who dug them a tunnel out of a churning volcano that was about to explode. But gaming prodigy Walter nearly tumbled into the rising lava. Kevin snatched up the boy and made a run for it as the lava began to flood the tunnel, but something suddenly blocked the exit. Kevin, with Walter tucked under his arm, raced down the tunnel the tardigrade had dug through the side of the volcano. Behind him, the lava flow was flooding the tunnel, pushing the extreme temperature even higher. Worst of all, something was now blocking the daylight at the end of the tunnel. Kevin's heart sank. Kevin's suspicion was that a rock fall or a boulder had fallen and cut off his and Walter's exit. But then a voice yelled, "Come on, Kevin, you're almost there." Kevin realized that the forms that were blocking the tunnel's light were only Evita and Pamela, who had come back to see what was slowing their friends. "Out of the way," Kevin roared. "The lava's right behind me." Instantly, the girls jumped back out of the tunnel. Daylight and cooler air flooded in. Kevin could feel the rock under his keds heating up as the magma raced close behind him. At last, he burst from the tunnel with Walter in his arms. Kevin instantly threw himself to the side, rolling his body and protecting Walter in his arms. From up the slope of the volcano, Pamela and Evita grabbed him and helped Kevin and Walter to climb higher. Lava spouted from the tunnel in a fiery gush. It poured down the side of the volcano, burning everything in its path. "Are you two okay?" Kevin asked Pamela and Evita. "We're fine," Pamela replied, "but I think Walter is really hurt." Walter hadn't made a sound since Kevin had saved him from nearly dropping into the magma inside the volcano. But the preteen's face was screwed up in pain, and tears stood out in his eyes. "Are you hurt?" Kevin asked gently. Walter nodded. "My feet. I think they got too close to the lava." "As soon as we're off this volcano and someplace safe, we'll take a look at your feet," Kevin assured Walter. Walter looked alarmed. "I don't think I can walk." "That's okay. I've got you," Pamela assured the boy. She scooped him up to ride piggyback. Kevin smiled his appreciation. 17-year-old Pamela was usually a lone wolf. It was nice to see her so concerned for the younger boy. "Thank you, Pamela. Now, we should put some more space between us and the volcano in case the eruption gets worse." None of the kids needed to be told twice. After an hour of hiking, Kevin declared that they were far enough away from the volcano to be safe from its searing magma. They made a makeshift camp near a clear spring where they all gulped as much water as their parched stomachs could hold. Kevin carefully examined Walter's feet. His sneakers had come so close to the lava that their soles were twisted and melted. Walter cried in pain when Kevin tried to pull them free, so Kevin had to cut the shoes off. Although they hadn't actually touched the magma, the intense heat left Walter with third-degree blisters on his feet. Kevin carefully examined them. "I can make an herbal salve to heal them, but you still shouldn't walk on them for a while." "Does this mean Walter has to drop out of the testing?" Pamela asked, a motherly frown of worry on her face. "That's still up to him," Kevin declared. Walter immediately shook his head. "I don't want to continue with the testing. I know I messed up big time in the volcano. I'm not ready to be the next keeper." Evita put a sisterly arm around Walter and hugged him. "That's okay, Walter. There's wisdom in recognizing when something isn't your destiny." Walter looked at them all uneasily. "Does this mean you're going to abandon me here so Evita and Pamela can go on with their tests?" "Never," Pamela declared at the same time Evita exclaimed, "Of course not." Kevin smiled, admiring their devotion to each other and their commitment to the concept of a team. "We won't abandon you, Walter. In fact, the first thing we're going to do is get your feet healed." Kevin took stock of the contents in his herbal satchel. He had many ingredients that could help Walter, but the best thing for burns is aloe vera, he muttered to himself, and it's always best when it's fresh. He remembered they had passed a grove of trees with a few small aloe vera plants. They wouldn't be enough for Kevin's purposes, but perhaps there would be more within the grove itself. He explained his plan to the kids. "I'll go with you," Evita offered, "in case you need help carrying it back." "I'll stay here with Walter," Pamela decided. "He shouldn't be left alone when he can't walk or defend himself." Walter sent Pamela a shy smile of thanks. "That's the plan, then," Kevin agreed in his private thoughts. He suspected that this curious division of their party might have something to do with the test to see which of the two remaining candidates would be the next keeper of the White Tower. Only Pamela and Evita remained in the contest. The testing had to be drawing to a close. Kevin resolved that as soon as Walter's feet were healed, they'd immediately start looking for the real arena where the final test would take place. Kevin and Evita hiked back to the grove where Kevin had spotted the aloe vera. "I'll harvest these, but we're going to need a lot more," Kevin told Evita, thinking of the super refined version he wanted to make to heal Walter's blisters immediately. "I'll see if there are more in the grove," Evita volunteered. She stepped into the grove. It was warm and shady and especially welcome after the stultifying heat of the inside of the volcano. She pushed tree branches and bushes out of her way. Her hand broke through a large spider web and she gave a squeak of alarm. She shook her hand hard and wiped it on her pants, shuddering with disgust. "I hate spiders," she groaned to herself. Despite growing up in the country, Evita's hatred for spiders was truly epic. She had always made her parents take care of any she found in the house. She had once refused to take a bath for a week after she'd found a spider in the bathtub when she was 8. Now, she forced her fear to the back of her mind. She needed to find more aloe for Walter's burns. If she was going to be the next keeper of the White Tower of the Upper Realm, she couldn't let a few arachnids get in her way. Even if just the thought of 8 spindly legs made her feel sick to her stomach. She pressed deeper into the grove, her eyes scanning the ground for the little aloe plants. With delight, she realized there was a large patch of them growing directly in the middle of the clearing at the center of the grove. "Kevin, I found some more," she called back over her shoulder as she turned to collect them. She found a sharp stone and began to harvest them. She was so intent on gathering as much as possible that she didn't notice the approaching shadow until it fell directly on top of her. Puzzled, Evita looked around. She couldn't see anything to her left or her right or even behind her. What could have caused this shadow? Had a cloud moved to cover the sun? She looked up and froze in utter terror. In her haste to find the aloe plants, Evita hadn't taken stock of her surroundings. Otherwise, she would have noticed the giant spider web that stretched across the entire length of the clearing. The web was dozens of feet wide and the strands were nearly as thick as her finger. Worst of all, a fat, giant spider had crawled out to the center of the web. It was so big it had blocked the sun above and cast the shadow that had puzzled Evita so much. It peered down at Evita through its 8 alien eyes as it opened its mandibles. Evita worked her mouth, trying to scream, to call for help, to get Kevin to come take care of this giant, terrifying spider for her. But she was too scared. Not a sound came from her mouth. The spider leaned down closer, maw gaping as if it could swallow Evita whole. And just when Evita thought this nightmare could possibly get worse, 2 more spiders, each as huge and terrifying as the first, crawled out of the shadows to join the first. While escaping the volcano, which was about to explode, Walter's feet were badly burned, and he decided to drop out of the testing. Only Evita and Pamela remained, but before they continued, Kevin had to heal Walter's burns. He and Evita ventured forth to locate aloe vera plants, and Evita encountered her worst nightmare, 3 giant spiders. Kevin had heard Evita call out that she had found more of the aloe vera plants that he needed to create a super balm to heal the burns on the soles of Walter's feet. By the time he approached the clearing where Evita was harvesting the aloe vera, she was already cowering before the 3 giant spiders looming over her from their webs spun across the top of the clearing. The entrance to the clearing was now blocked by a new tangled web, a web that was obviously fresh. 16-year-old Evita had severe arachnophobia and was too terrified to even call out for help. Kevin's first instinct was to slice through the web with his night dagger, charge into the clearing, and save Evita. He could easily have defeated the giant spiders with his ordinary fighting skills. Or he could have tried to reach out with his ability to communicate with animals to try to reason with the spiders. Yet something held him back. As guardian of the test, it was his responsibility to guide and advise the contestants, but not fight their battles for them. Knowing how much Evita feared spiders, it seemed likely this wasn't just a random encounter. This was part of Evita's testing to see if she would be the next keeper of the White Tower of the Upper Realm. Kevin decided to stay out of sight for now, but he was ready to spring forward to take charge if it seemed like Evita was failing her test and likely to come to real harm from the spiders. Evita scrambled back on the floor of the clearing as the spiders crawled closer. She wasn't even aware she was moving until her back hit a tree at the edge of the clearing, and she could go no further. "I can't panic like this," she told herself. "If I do, I'll be spider food for sure." She closed her eyes and took deep breaths. "Don't think about spiders. Don't think about spiders," she chanted to herself. "Think about how to solve this problem. It's just another problem. So how would you solve it?" Evita realized that in any other situation she would do what she always did, try to forge lines of communication and cooperation. Her levels revolved around her abilities as a politician, someone who could forge bonds between people, create compromises, and understand how everyone's abilities could be used for the greater good. Her abilities had made her a successful teen mayor of her hometown in Tierra del Fuego. How could they help her now? Evita realized that even though she didn't have Kevin's ability to communicate directly with animals, she might be able to use her levels to forge a bond with these spiders all the same. People were just animals when you came down to it, after all. Evita forced herself to remain in one place. She began to glow slightly as she reached out to the spiders with her levels, forcing her curiosity to overcome her disgust. All she got back was a black and sticky feeling of disgust from the spiders. They didn't want to be her friend or work with her for some mutual good. They were just hungry and grumpy and wanted to eat her. She was nothing more than their prey. Evita gaped in astonishment. Never had her powers failed to form some kind of bond with others. She was so surprised she almost didn't see the thick, hairy leg of the lead spider stabbing down at her. She rolled away at the last minute. The leg stabbed into the dirt where she had just been. The second spider shot a thick, sticky cord of webbing at her from its abdomen. Evita scrambled up and ran, only to find the exit from the clearing already blocked by the tangled mess of webs. She tried to cut the webs with the sharp rock she had been using to harvest aloe vera, but the web was too elastic. She was trapped. She wheeled around. The third spider dropped from the web to land right in front of her. Evita dodged to the side. A thick gob of webbing from the second spider caught the third spider directly in its 8 eyes. The third spider thrashed in pain as the acidic webbing burned its eyes. It suddenly stopped chasing Evita to swipe at the second spider. At last, Evita found her voice. "Kevin, help! Kevin!" "Evita!" Kevin called back from the other side of the web that blocked the clearing's exit. "Kevin, save me!" Evita cried. "You don't need me to save you," Kevin called back. "You can save yourself. Use your levels." "I tried. They don't want to cooperate with me. They want to eat me." Evita screeched the last 2 words so loudly that the second and third spiders ended their spat with each other and returned to their pursuit of her. Evita tried to dodge behind a tree, but the brush was far too thick for her to push her way through. She found a sturdy fallen branch and scooped it up to defend herself. The third spider, still half blinded by webbing, charged her. Evita swung the branch at its gaping maw, only to have the second spider knock the branch from her hand. Evita threw herself out of their way and raced to the far side of the clearing. "Evita, your levels go both ways," Kevin called. "If you can't get them to cooperate with you, get them to do the opposite with each other." Evita heard the words but could hardly comprehend them. The spiders charged again, and she had to duck and dodge, staying ahead of them each time only by inches. But she was already getting tired, and knew they'd catch her sooner or later. Most likely, very soon. Again, she forced her brain to work. If she used her leveled powers to get the spiders to do the opposite of cooperating, that meant she needed to turn them against each other. Evita realized that Kevin was right. She'd already seen it when the second and the third spiders had gotten into a fight. She just had to do it some more. Kevin reached into herself and found the part of her that showed her what to say and do to bring people together. She asked it to do the opposite and was instantly flooded with inspiration. "Thanks, Kevin. I got it," Evita called back to him. Evita leapt up and grabbed a low-hanging tree branch. The tree was one that the large web was attached to. She waited as one of the spiders raced up after her, easily climbing the tree with its 8 legs. Evita forced herself to remain still until the spider was very close. It lashed out with one clawed leg. At the last moment, Evita ducked. The claw missed her but slashed through the supporting spoke of the web just like she had hoped. She then jumped to the next tree. Another spider was waiting for her there. Again, she ducked at the last moment, and the spider severed the supporting line of the web instead of Evita's spine. Evita ducked and dodged through the webbing. The spider severed more of the web's supporting strands but didn't seem to care. At last, only one strand remained. Evita could see how strained the web was. All of its elasticity was stretched in breaking point under its own sagging weight. As a politician, Evita knew that timing was important. But at this moment, the timing was everything. She had to get this just right, or else her time in the contest and her life would be over. She dropped from the trees and jogged to the center of the clearing, careful not to touch the dangling sticky web. The spiders, though humongous, had no trouble carrying close to the ground. Evita paused, letting them get as close as possible. Then she ran directly at the biggest spider. Surprised, it opened its maw wide to swallow her down and ran forward. But at the last second, Evita went into a baseball slide and passed easily under the spider. When she came up, all 3 spiders were in the center of the clearing, directly under the sagging web. Kevin had watched everything and understood Evita's plan. "Now, Evita, do it now," he yelled. Evita nodded, reached up, and severed the last supporting web strand with her sharp rock. The strand was under so much tension it cut easily. The web collapsed on top of the spiders, entangling them in its sticky strands. Furious, the spiders struggled and fought, doing more damage to each other than the web. For every blow delivered, each spider tried to retaliate with 2 more. Soon they were fighting and lunging at each other, rolling over and over. Every movement only pulled the web tighter around themselves until soon they couldn't move at all. The 3 giant spiders were wrapped up in one big ball of their own making, hopelessly tangled in their own web. Kevin sliced through the web, blocking the clearing's entrance with his night dagger. "That was good work," he told Evita, who was still catching her breath. "Thanks," Evita panted. She glanced over at the spiders, who still twitched and roared in their prison cocoon. She hated spiders, but still. "I always thought my powers were for good, for creating cooperation and togetherness. I didn't know they could be used for evil." Kevin looked mildly surprised. Was it evil if the result was good? Evita shook her head. "That's the same as saying the ends justify the means." "Sometimes they do," Kevin pointed out. "But how do we know when ends justify the means and when you're only justifying your own selfishness?" Evita wondered. "How do you know if you're not just getting caught in a web of your own making like those spiders back there?" Kevin nodded, feeling like his own mentor, the Night King. "That's when you must know yourself most of all. Now let's see if you gathered enough aloe for me to heal Walter before the spiders trampled this clearing flat." Evita had to face down 3 giant spiders in the aloe vera grove, and finding herself unable to calm her attackers, she was goaded by Kevin into going the opposite direction with her innate skills. She caused dissent among the spiders, who then attacked each other before being nabbed by Evita. Evita had some misgivings about the means with which she extracted herself from a deadly situation, but Kevin consoled her as they returned to their quest of getting aloe for Walter's burns. Evita handed the aloe vera she had gathered over to Kevin. Combined with what he gathered outside of the grove, he had just enough to make his super balm for Walter's feet. They quickly made their way back to the spring, where they had left Walter and Pamela. Kevin got to work on the necessary cure for Walter's burns. He mixed in several other herbal ingredients and refined them over the little spirit stove Alohi had thoughtfully provided when she had granted him the contents of his trusty satchel again. When it was ready, Kevin looked at Evita. "Would you like to do the honors? You fought for the aloe." Evita looked over to where Pamela was entertaining Walter with stories of her time in an underground fight club in Sri Lanka. The leveled warrior had become quite protective of the preteen gaming prodigy, showing a more nurturing side to her usual gruff self. Evita smiled and shook her head. "I think it would be better coming from Pamela." Although Walter still cringed and whined, Pamela's no-nonsense attitude soon had him accepting the healing aloe mixture. Minutes after it was applied, he started smiling. "Hey, I think it's working." He lifted one of the claws holding the mixture in place. "There's hardly any redness left at all," Walter reported. "That's good," Kevin replied. "That means you'll be able to walk on them as soon as we create some kind of footwear for you. Your sneakers were ruined and your feet will still need some protection." "Actually, I was working on that while you were away," Pamela offered shyly. "My mom taught me some basic wadikaya weaving when I was little. I thought maybe I could make some sandals." She produced 2 sandals woven from nearby leaves and reeds that were just Walter's size. They weren't the most polished pair of footwear, but they were very sturdy. Walter happily took them with thanks and put them on. Pamela helped him do his feet and he took a few steps. Then he smiled. "All healed and ready to go. Where should we look for the arena next, Kevin?" "We'll need to take another look at the compass," Kevin decided. Since only Evita and Pamela are still in the contest, they're the only ones who will need to touch it for us to get a reading. Kevin produced the strange compass the Night King had left him. As always, the needle was spinning randomly around. Evita and Pamela both put a finger on the compass. Usually it stopped swinging around and pointed them in the direction of the arena, but this time it continued to swing. "Does that mean Walter is still in the contest?" Pamela wondered. "No way," Walter declared. "I said I was out, and that's all that it takes. That's all it took when Angel left the contest," he reminded them. "Does that mean it's broken?" Evita asked. "There's another possibility," Kevin pointed out. "Any ordinary compass will act like this too if the circumstances are right." Evita snapped her fingers, realizing what Kevin was referring to. "You mean a compass will act like this if it's near magnetic north, right?" "Right," Kevin confirmed, "which means that the arena is right." But before he could finish the sentence, the ground under them opened up into a deep, dark hole, and they all fell inside. When Kevin awoke, he, Evita, Pamela, and Walter were lying on the floor of a cave. Kevin slowly tested his limbs and found that they were unbroken despite the long fall. In fact, they weren't even sore or bruised. Kevin suspected the strange forces of the upper realm had brought them to this place through means much less mundane than ordinary gravity. The kids began to stir and sit up. "Where are we?" Pamela wondered, looking around. The cave, shrouded in mystique, gave off an otherworldly energy. "We're in the Cave of Echoing Dreams," Kevin proclaimed. "How do you know that?" Walter demanded, getting to his now healed feet. "I have been here before," Kevin told the kids, "both in real life and in a vision quest. This is where I saw Alohi undergo her final test to become the keeper of the White Tower of the Upper Realm." "Then that means," Evita sounded breathless with wonder, "that this is the arena where your final test will be." Kevin looked from Evita to Pamela. "Are you ready?" "Yes," both girls said at the same time. There was suddenly a flash of blinding light. When they could see again, they realized the cave was now filled with 1,000 obsidian mirrors. Each mirror looked identical to the casual observer, but within their dark reflective surfaces lay a subtle nuance that only the chosen one could discern. Kevin thought back to everything he had seen in his vision quest when he had observed the testing Alohi had undergone. Alohi's natural levels had originally enabled her to communicate with plants. Under her touch, the flora of her native island responded with outsized, verdant forms thriving in the vibrant tapestry of the island. Plants grew to majestic heights, their leaves unfolding in intricate patterns, creating a garden that mirrored the boundless potential within Alohi herself. Alohi's abilities hadn't stopped there. She developed her abilities until she fully harmonized with the very essence of nature. Only then had she been sent tests of communication, battle, and wisdom. But Alohi had then been fully in her adulthood, and her powers had completely developed by the time she entered the Cave of Echoing Dreams. Although teenagers, Evita and Pamela had not yet had the time or the experience to expand their abilities beyond the areas of their natural levels. In his private thoughts, Kevin believed both of them would have more testing to endure before they faced the final challenge Kevin had seen Alohi go through in his vision quest. All that Kevin could be sure of was that he would be by their side every step of the way in his capacity as the guardian of the test. He would be there to guide and mentor them. He had seen the Night King do the same for Alohi in his visions. "One of you must go first and choose a mirror," Kevin told Evita and Pamela. The girls exchanged looks. Evita saw Pamela shoot a worried look back at Walter. "I'll go first," Evita volunteered. "Whatever the next test is, I'm ready." Kevin smiled. "Does that mean you think you know what the test is?" Evita shook her head. "I don't have a clue, but somehow I'm okay with that uncertainty. I guess that means I'm ready." "I think so too," Kevin agreed. He motioned to the cave and the 1,000 glittering obsidian mirrors. Evita stepped forward, considering each. It took a long time with so many mirrors. I don't know which to pick," she finally admitted. "Didn't you say you were okay with uncertainty?" Kevin asked kindly. Evita smiled. "I did say that. Then maybe it doesn't matter which I pick." She stepped forward and reached for the nearest mirror. Something inside Kevin made him step with her and place a fatherly hand on her shoulder, just as her fingers brushed the surface of the mirror. Evita never even took hold of the mirror. Instead, she and Kevin were sucked inside of it in a whirling, spinning kaleidoscope of color and sound. The next thing Evita knew, she was lying in a makeshift boxing ring in some dark and echoing space. Her ears were ringing, and somewhere a crowd was shouting and jeering. She looked around, trying to get her bearings, but there was a bright light directly overhead, sending a glare into her eyes. "Where am I?" she asked. "What happened?" A man with more pimples than teeth stepped into her view, blocking out the harsh light over her. "I just knocked out the top fighter in all of Sri Lanka," the man snarled at her. He pounded his fists together. They were taped like a bare knuckle boxers. Who's that?" Evita asked, desperately trying to figure out what on earth was going on. "You," the man grinned, showing blackened gums. "And now I'm about to do it again." "Why?" Evita wiped away a trickle of blood from the side of her mouth and stared at it. "What kind of animal are you?" she asked the brutish man in horror. "Because then it will be me, Mongo of the Kasbah, who all will know as the best fighter in all of Sri Lanka," he finished. "That's the kind of animal I am." "Evita!" yelled a familiar voice. Evita looked over and saw Kevin by the side of the ring, as if he was a trainer. "You have to fight," Kevin yelled. Evita only looked terrified, but Kevin's heart sank as her opponent pulled back his fist for a devastating blow. Evita, the politician from Tierra del Fuego, and Pamela, the warrior from Sri Lanka, would face their final tests in the Cave of Echoing Dreams. Evita volunteered to go first. As soon as she touched one of the obsidian mirrors, she and Kevin were sucked into it. The next thing Evita knew, she had been knocked flat by a man named Mongo, who claimed that he was supposed to be the best fighter in all of Sri Lanka. Kevin watched as Evita lay sprawled in the middle of a makeshift boxing ring. She stared up at her opponent, a pimply, scarred man who was about to deliver another devastating punch to the teenager's face. Kevin willed Evita to get up to fight Mongo, but the girl didn't move. Kevin clenched his fists, ready to leap in to defend his charge. Although he knew the candidates to become the next keeper of the White Tower had to fight their own battles, as guardian of the test, it was his responsibility to make sure none of them came to real harm. Kevin grabbed the ropes, preparing to leap into the ring when the bell signaled the end of the round. Evita's opponent smirked and lowered his fists. "Don't worry, girlie. I'll be back to finish you in round 2. Mongo of the Kesbah seethed at her as he sauntered off. Kevin hopped into the ring and helped Evita to a stool in her corner. The girl was dazed, not just from the blow that had knocked her flat, but from finding herself suddenly transported to a fight club in a Sri Lankan ghetto. There were other changes in Evita that Kevin was sure the girl hadn't fully processed yet. "Kevin, where are we?" Evita begged. "Why are we here?" "It's another test," Kevin gently explained. "But why do I feel so strange?" Evita tenderly probed her swelling cheek, then realized there were other changes to her face and body. Evita looked down at herself. She was now taller by several inches. She stretched her arms and legs, feeling their smooth power and natural grace. Evita had never been a couch potato, but neither had she been a highly trained athlete. "What happened to me?" she demanded. Kevin knew it would be best to show Evita rather than to try to explain. He handed her a small mirror. "Go ahead and look." Evita glanced in the mirror. Just moments ago, she had looked into an obsidian mirror in the Cave of Echoing Dreams, and her face had been perfectly ordinary and familiar. But now, I look just like Pamela," Evita exclaimed, staring back at the rival-leveled warrior's features in the mirror. "No," Kevin corrected. "You are Pamela." Evita gaped in shock. She had seen and done any number of strange things since becoming aware she was possibly one of the next keepers of the White Tower, but this was one of the most bizarre. Kevin empathized with the girl. Of all the candidates, Evita and Pamela had the least in common. Pamela was a leveled warrior, often gruff and stoic. Pamela was more likely to leap before she looked and to fight her way out of any situation. Evita's levels were geared to her abilities as a politician, bringing people together and forming compromises and alliances. Evita would always try to resolve a conflict through mediation and cooperation long before it would cross her mind to throw a punch. Kevin knew he had to quickly get Evita up to speed. Pamela was part of an underground fight club, remember? Evita nodded. She was opening and closing her hands, feeling the power in them. It wasn't a bad feeling, but it was unfamiliar. "That's where you are now," Kevin continued. "You need to fight this opponent, Mongo, the same way Pamela would have." "I can't fight," Evita protested. "I'm not a fighter." "To be the next keeper of the White Tower, you'll have to become one," Kevin reminded her. "The keeper needs to balance all aspects of herself and all of her levels. That is your test." Evita shook her head. "But Kevin..." At the sound of the bell signaling round 2, Kevin cut Evita off by shoving her back into the ring. Evita stumbled back into the ring where her opponent Mongo was already waiting, cracking his knuckles and grinning unpleasantly. He looked as big as a mountain. "We really don't have to do this," Evita began. She held out her hands in a pleading gesture. "Of course we do," Mongo growled. He took a roundhouse swing at Evita. Evita saw his fist was glowing blue. Her opponent was also a leveled fighter. Evita mentally braced herself for the blow, but her muscles, or rather Pamela's muscles, reacted instinctively, making her skillfully dodge the blow, much to her astonishment. Relieved, she backed up a few paces to buy herself time to find a way to compromise with this man. "Look," she tried again. "You want to win this fight, and I don't want to fight you. Surely you can see there's no reason we both can't get what we want." Mongo blinked in surprise. "What? You mean you just give up?" "Yes. Wouldn't that be the best way for us both to get what we want?" "No!" roared Mongo in outrage. "I came here to prove myself against the best fighter in Sri Lanka. Somehow that's you, girlie. If you just give up now, I'll look like an idiot. People will say I didn't really fight you, that I didn't really win." "But one of us could get really hurt," Evita pleaded. "One of us could die." "Nope," Mongo retorted. "There's no way a slip of a girl like you could kill a big, strong man like me. And if you die," he paused and grinned unpleasantly, showing all the gaps in his teeth, "well, if you die, that's just the nature of the fight." Mongo lunged forward, fists swinging and glowing blue with leveled power. Pamela's body took over, making Evita duck and dodge every blow until she was back near her corner near Kevin. "Use your leveled powers," Kevin urged as soon as she was close enough to hear him over the yelling of the crowd. The crowd was not happy with how the fight was going. They had come to see a battle royal, not watch Mongo of the Kespa chase the current Sri Lankan champion Pamela around the ring like a dog chasing its tail. "Yes, right. My leveled powers," Evita agreed. She looked her opponent directly in the eye. "Sir, please listen to me," she began and reached into herself, drawing on her leveled powers. Always before, she'd been able to call on them to help create unity even in the worst gridlock. But when Evita raised her hands in a pleading gesture, instead of waves of calmness and good feeling, her leveled power burst from them in a spray of blue sparks. They hit Mongo directly in the face, sending him backward in confusion, roaring in pain. Evita was equally confused. She stared at her hands as if they'd betrayed her. She looked back at Kevin. Kevin nodded to her. "That's right," he called to her. "You don't just have Pamela's body, you have her leveled powers too. You need to harness Pamela's warrior levels to fight your way out of this." Evita looked back at her opponent just in time to see Mongo stomp his foot, sending a wave of blue leveled power directly for Evita. Again, Evita's instincts took over. Her body channeled her levels, sending her leaping high in the air before Mongo's foot even hit the ground. The wave passed harmlessly under her, and Evita lightly landed a few feet from her opponent. "Whoa," Evita breathed, feeling more power course through her. With a yell of anger, Mongo charged at Evita. Evita caught him by the wrist and spun. Mongo's momentum carried him up and over her head as she twisted him around her body. He hit the ring hard enough to bounce. Evita landed a few blows to his head and face, but Mongo felt like he was made of stone. He shot a foot out and tripped Evita. She went down to the floor of the ring again. "Maybe this still won't be much of a fight after all," Mongo of the Kespa declared as he threw a punch that could have easily killed Evita had she only been her usual self. But Evita threw up a shield of leveled power just in time to stop the blow. Mongo hammered at it again and again, expending precious energy with no result. Kevin was about to yell at Evita that she couldn't win this fight from behind a shield, but then he saw a slight smile on her lips. Kevin immediately realized Evita's strategy. She was letting her opponent wear himself out so that Evita could strike all that more effectively when he was weakened. At last, Mongo paused to catch his breath from the fury of blows. As soon as he did, Evita sprang to her feet, gave a wave of her hands, collecting the energy that had been her shield and reforming it into a glowing blue ball of leveled power. She unleashed a huge glowing ball of energy directly at Mongo. It sent him flying across the ring and through the ropes, breaking through them. Mongo hit the floor, his skull bouncing off the concrete. Evita turned back to Kevin, feeling very satisfied with herself. "Hear that?" she called to Kevin. "They're cheering for me." Kevin looked behind Evita and realized something. They're not cheering for you, they're cheering for him. Evita whirled around to follow Kevin's pointing finger, and then her eyes went wide with horror. As soon as Evita touched one of the obsidian mirrors in the Cave of Echoing Dreams, she and Kevin were sucked into the mirror and whisked through a fantastical portal. The next thing Evita knew, she was suddenly in Pamela's body with Pamela's leveled warrior powers. She also had to fight in one of Pamela's underground fight club bouts. "Look out!" Kevin yelled to Evita from his place at the side of the makeshift boxing ring. Bloody and bruised, Evita's opponent, Mongo of the Kesbah, had still gotten back on his feet. He was a pimply, scarred man who thought he was actually fighting Pamela, the best underground fighter in all of Sri Lanka. Mongo was determined to make a name for himself by defeating Pamela, even if that meant he had to kill her. The crowd was impressed that Mongo was back on his feet after such a terrible fall. They were even more impressed that Mongo threw out his arms and two long blades made out of nothing but pure leveled energy sprang from his hands. With a roar, Mongo charged at Evita, blades ready to slice her in two. Evita threw out her hands again, but this time not in defense or to plead with her opponent. Instead, she unleashed darts of blue-leveled energy from each of her fingertips at Mongo. Each one was a deadly, sizzling bolt. Mongo was forced to break off his charge and dodge the electrical threats. Kevin could see his blades of leveled energy flicker as he did so. Kevin recognized Mongo was already running low on leveled energy. If he wasn't careful, Evita's opponent could expend so much power in this fight that it would leave him temporarily incapacitated. Evita unleashed 3 more leveled attacks before Mongo was able to take the offense. This time, Mongo formed his energy into throwing daggers and whipped them at Evita. Surprised, Evita couldn't get her energy shield in place in time. She was forced to dodge, and the second blade passed close enough that it severed a lock of her hair. "Don't let him catch his breath or get his balance." Kevin had to shout his advice over the crowd, which was getting more unruly by the moment. Obeying, Evita stomped her feet, one after another, sending concentric waves of power at Mongo. Mongo dodged the first one, but came down just as the second one rushed over him, knocking him off his feet. Evita had not imbued her blasts of power with a killing force or even enough force to disable Mongo. Kevin knew this was a mistake. Mongo of the Kesbah had already proclaimed his intention to kill Evita to win the match if he had to. This was not a time for mercy or temperance. Kevin realized that this would be a hard lesson the girl had to learn. Evita's opponent tucked himself into a ball and somersaulted into Evita. Evita was sent stumbling off balance. Fortunately, she hit the ropes before she could go down to the mat. Then the battle was truly on, and the two fighters unleashed leveled powers upon each other again and again. Hours later, Evita swayed on her feet. She had never expended so much leveled power all at once in her entire life. She knew that she was down to the dregs of her abilities. But Kevin could see Mongo looked even worse for wear. He probably had a concussion from the blow that had knocked him out of the ring, and he was bleeding from a number of cuts and gashes inflicted on him by his opponent. "You can do this," Kevin yelled to Evita. "You can end this now. Don't lose this chance." Evita nodded to show that she had heard. She looked for a way to end the battle quickly without harming Mongo permanently. Evita gathered her remaining abilities and channeled them up through her body and down through her hands. She brought her hands together in a sharp clap that sent a bolt of energy directly at her opponent. Faster than Evita had expected, Mongo formed his leveled abilities into a shield, and he sent her bolt rebounding directly back at Evita. The ricochet had sapped some of the bolt's power, but it was still enough to knock Evita back and leave her dazed. Kevin's heart sank. He was certain now that the brutal Mongo would take his opportunity to finally defeat Evita. But instead, the man just stood there swaying. Clearly, he had come to the end of his energy. "Evita, do Pamela's signature move," Kevin ordered. Pamela had described her signature move to all of the kids one night when they had been sitting around a bonfire. Evita knew exactly what Kevin meant, but "I think I'm out of power," she called back. "Dig deep," Kevin urged. "You can do this." Evita wasn't sure she could, but if Kevin thought she could, she would try. Evita shut out her opponent, the club, and the entire world and gathered all of her remaining power. It seemed like a pitifully small amount, but it was all that she had left. Evita spun in a quick circle, her hair whipping around and sending a wave of energy across the ring. It wasn't her best or strongest blow of the fight, But in his weakened state, Mongo hardly flinched. The wave hit him at chest level and sent him toppling back like a felled tree. The mat trembled with the force of it. Dead silence reigned as everyone from the crowd to the announcer to Evita waited to see if Mongo would get up again. He did not. The announcer stood at his table. "Ladies and gentlemen, I give you your winner and undefeated champion, Pamela." Evita appreciated the warm wash of the crowd's cheers, but not even that could combat the extreme fatigue that overwhelmed her. She wasn't even sure she could walk back to her corner of the ring. Felt like a million miles away. But suddenly Kevin was there, helping hold her up. "You did it, Evita," he told her. "You harnessed Pamela's powers and defeated your opponent." Evita only nodded, too tired to talk. Kevin looked back over his shoulder. Mongo's trainer and friends were dragging him from the ring. From the dark looks they threw at Evita, Kevin knew that they were not taking their fighter's defeat with good grace. He suspected they might be back to cause more trouble. As champion, Evita, or rather Pamela, had a small lounge space in the fight club layer to herself. Kevin allowed her to sleep for several hours to recover her strength naturally and ordered food to be brought in to restore her strength. After she awoke and ate, Evita was looking much better. In fact, she was grinning. "I did it, Kevin. I actually defeated that big meanie." Evita threw a few air punches. A spark of leveled energy flew from one fist and sent a box of takeout flying across the room. "Oops. Sorry. Guess I still need to learn to control Pamela's levels." In his private thoughts, Kevin believed that wasn't all Evita needed to learn. She hadn't dealt with her opponent with the necessary seriousness a deadly foe required. Kevin believed that was the reason they were still here. Evita's testing was clearly not over yet. "What do we do now, Kevin?" Evita asked. Kevin considered the question and felt the answer come to him. "You should go home," he decided. Outside, Kevin quickly oriented himself and led Evita through the winding streets to where Pamela's parents had been living the last time he had been to Sri Lanka. Even if Pamela's parents had moved to a new building, Kevin was sure one of the neighbors could point them in the right direction. It turned out that Pamela's parents were in a new building, but that building was in the exact same spot that the old one had been in. The crumbling tenement had been replaced by a neat and tidy apartment building with all the modern conveniences. Evita found Pamela's keys among her things and let them into the top floor apartment. "Hello, is anybody here?" Kevin called out as they entered. But as soon as they did, they stopped. When Kevin had met them, Pamela's parents had been very poor but proud. Their apartment didn't have any luxuries but had been very neat. But now the apartment was a mess with furniture overturned and dishes smashed on the floor. "What happened here?" Evita wondered, also sensing the wrongness. A scream came up from outside the window. Kevin and Evita ran to it and looked down. Kevin instantly recognized the two forms that were being forced into the back of a pickup truck with a dump bed. They were Pamela's parents, Dharika and Shrihi, and they were bound and gagged. Kevin also instantly recognized their kidnapper. He was the man Evita had just defeated in the underground fight club, Mongo of the Kesbah. Evita, in Pamela's body and with her skills and levels, fought and won a bout in an underground fight club against an opponent, Mongo of the Kesbah. But when she and Kevin went to check on Pamela's parents, Dharika and Shrihi, they found Mongo kidnapping them. Kevin and Evita stared down from Dharika and Shrihi's top-floor apartment in horror. From there, they had a perfect view of a pickup truck with a dump bed. Bound and gagged, Pamela's parents struggled uselessly against their bonds. Their kidnapper, Mongo of the Kesbah, whom Evita had just defeated in the underground fight club, looked up and spotted Kevin and Evita, who presently looked just like Pamela. Mongo's scarred and pimply face split into a wide grin. "Stop! What are you doing?" Evita yelled down in horror. She didn't even know Darkhun Shrihi and certainly knew that they weren't her actual mother and father, and yet she was filled with Pamela's own fears for the safety of her loving parents. "You might have defeated me in the ring," Mongo yelled back up, "but you'll never fight again after I dump your parents in the Mahaweli Ganja River." Evita's eyes went wide with horror. Kevin could sense with his finely tuned empathy that although Darkhun Shrihi were not her parents, Evita already felt a deep responsibility toward them. "I won't let you get away with this," Evita yelled back, already climbing out of the window and reaching for the nearby fire escape. "You'll never be able to stop me," Mongo laughed. "Not when it's just a little girly like you and that pencil-neck trainer of yours." He jumped in the pickup's cab and took off. "Come on, Kevin," Evita yelled as she dropped from handhold to foothold all the way down the fire escape. "Let's show that big meanie what happens when you underestimate people like us." Kevin couldn't agree more. He set his mouth into a grin line and followed Evita down the fire escape. Evita was all for going after Mongo on foot, but fate, or the powers that controlled the testing in the upper realm, had decreed a delivery van had been left idling at the curb unattended. Without a second thought, Kevin jumped behind the wheel and Evita climbed into the passenger side. Kevin floored the gas. Mongo's head start was enough to put him out of Kevin's view, and Kevin knew Mongo's familiarity with Pamela's hometown would give him an advantage. Fortunately, Kevin had been here before in the ordinary realm and knew exactly where the Mahaweli Ganja River was. Kevin swerved as he made a hard left out of Pamela's low-income neighborhood, narrowly dodging street vendors and cyclists as he sped into a commercial area lined with shops, cafes, and theaters. Kevin?" Evita's eyes were scanning further down the street, where she saw their route was completely closed off by construction. "I see it," Kevin replied, knowing he'd have to improvise. With another jerk of the wheel, the van hopped the curb on the opposite sidewalk, circumventing the construction workers and the equipment. Escaping the crowded commercial district, Kevin turned north, heading into the hills that separated the town from the Mahaweli Ganja River, which was prone to flooding in the monsoon season. They swerved up the winding road, dodging other vehicles and the occasional donkey cart. Evita stuck her head out of the window and shaded her eyes. "I don't see him anywhere," she yelled back to Kevin. "Are you sure you're going the right way?" "I'm sure," Kevin yelled back, his knuckles white on the wheel as he poured all of his concentration into ducking and dodging them around obstacles and pedestrians. He floored the accelerator again, and the van blindly leapt over the crest of the hill. It landed so hard, sparks burst from the undercarriage as it scraped against the tarmac. "There's Mongo," Evita pointed. From the top of the hill, they had a clear view down the bare dirt hillside. Mongo's truck was stuck at the bottom. Mongo had obviously had a run-in with a livestock trailer full of pigs. The giant hogs had escaped from the busted trailer and were roaming around the road. Kevin could see Mongo waving his fist at the animals as he tried to steer through the milling animals, but the 400-pound beast paid him no mind. Kevin and Evita burst out laughing as they saw Mongo's predicament. "That just might make me start believing in karma," Evita said between giggles. "He's not going to give up that easily," Kevin replied. "We can't slow down now." As Kevin zipped around the tight curves, he saw Mongo finally nudge his truck through the hogs. Kevin kept his focus as he navigated the narrow turns, relying on Evita to keep an eye on Mongo's path. Although they had significantly closed the gap between them and the disgraced fighter, Mongo still had the advantage. Kevin could see the river in the distance and knew he would need every ounce of luck and skill to catch up to Mongo before he dumped Pamela's parents into the swollen, sandy river in what Kevin could only assume was a skewed act of revenge at being beaten in the ring by a girl. "Look out, Kevin!" Evita pointed ahead to where two large trucks were trying to pass each other on the narrow, winding road. Neither driver wanted to allow the other to pass, so they blew their horns in irritation at each other. They took up the entire width of the road. Kevin could only hope there was no oncoming traffic coming up the hill in the opposite direction, or else the crash would be truly spectacular. "Can you see around them?" he asked Evita. "Not from here," Evita replied. Kevin knew Evita usually treated all decisions with the careful calculation of a diplomat, but her access to Pamela's powers must have been having a greater effect on her than he'd first realized. For without a second of hesitation, Evita hauled herself up onto the roof of the van and clung to the top, trying to see around the trucks. Not even Pamela's super strength could keep Evita clinging to the roof if he suddenly had to stop. Kevin prayed he wouldn't have to. Suddenly, Evita stuck her head down near Kevin's open window. "Now, Kevin, you can get around the trucks now." Kevin had already seen the opportunity. Kevin swerved around both trucks. The narrow hill road wasn't nearly wide enough for three, forcing two of the van's wheels to precariously teeter over the edge of the cliff. Just as he felt the cliff crumbling and the van tipping, they managed to get around the trucks. Kevin wrenched the van back into its proper lane and floored it, not wanting the angry truck drivers to rear-end him. Evita was jerked back and forth as she clung with all of Pamela's strength to the roof of the van. Kevin actually heard her laughing with delight. This is going too far, Kevin thought. Luckily, Kevin's cool head allowed him to maintain an attention to detail that was beyond Mongo's own ability taxed capacity. Mongo had mistimed his approach to the bridge and was stopped at a red light as a swarm of cars and trucks flooded by him. Evita pounded on the roof of the van. "Faster, Kevin! We almost have him! Faster!" But Kevin was still aware of the traffic and people around them. He had to slow or risk deadly injury to some innocent bystanders. Mongo glanced in his rear-view mirror and saw the van rocketing down off the hill toward him. He didn't know the van, but he sure recognized the girl clinging to its roof. The little wisp of a thing was crazier than he thought to come after him like this. So was the weird trainer of hers. Mongo could see it was the trainer manning the wheel of the van as he careened through the streets. Mongo didn't wait for the light. He pushed his truck to full speed, leaping through the intersection and letting the other car swerve to avoid him. He could see the long, high bridge over the Mahawali Ganja River. He stopped in the exact center of the bridge and backed up until the tailgate of the pickup hung over the river itself. Mongo leapt from the cab and reached for the lever to engage the pickup's dump feature. Pamela's parents let out muffled screams behind their gags as they realized they were about to be sent tumbling dozens of feet into the river below. But before he could engage the lever, something hit Mongo like a ton of bricks and sent him slumping to the pavement. He shook the stars out of his eyes and looked up. Evita stood over her foe. She got a sharp sense of satisfaction seeing him brought low and dazed again. She drew back her fist and channeled Pamela's leveled powers into a sharp stiletto blade, ready to plunge it directly between Mongo's eyes. Evita, in Pamela's body and with Pamela's levels and skills, fought and won a bout in an underground fight club against an opponent, Mongo of the Kesba. But sore loser Mongo kidnapped Pamela's parents, Darika and Shrihi, and was about to dump them into a river when Kevin and Evita finally caught up with him. Kevin leapt from the van he and Evita had used to pursue Mongo. They were in the exact center of the long high bridge that spanned the Mahawali Ganja River. Mongo had backed his pickup to the edge of the bridge and had been about to engage the bed's dump feature to send Pamela's bound and gagged parents, Darika and Shrihi, tumbling dozens of feet below into the monsoon-swollen river. Fortunately, Evita, who had been riding on the van's roof, had stopped Mongo before he could reach the lever to engage the pickup's dump bed. Evita now stood over the disgraced fighter. Pamela's leveled warrior powers, channeled into Evita's body, were formed into a deadly stiletto. She was ready to plunge it directly between Mongo's eyes. But as Kevin watched, Mongo's face crumpled into sobs. His chest heaved and he wailed, "Don't hurt me. Please, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Kevin, who had spent a significant amount of time in Hollywood while expanding his media empire and producing the epic Cleopatra movie, had never seen such a terrible, hammy performance. Mongo wailed, beat his chest, and sobbed out regrets and apologies. It was all as phony as a $3 bill. The disgraced fighter couldn't even work up a few crocodile tears. But Evita hesitated. Kevin could practically see her diplomatic self fighting Pamela's warrior instincts. The glowing blue blade of leveled energy flickered in her hand and then went out. Kevin tried to warn her. "Evita, don't. He's going to..." But it was too late. The second Mongo saw the blade disappear, he reached up, grabbed the dump lever, and yanked it down, laughing the whole time. The pickup's dump bed instantly shot up and sent Pamela's bound and gagged parents, Daraka and Shrihi, tumbling dozens of feet into the monsoon-swollen river below. "No!" Evita screamed. She ran to the edge of the bridge and watched Daraka and Shrihi hit the water and disappear. She glared back at Mongo. "You're an animal!" she screamed. Mongo grinned, his pimply and scarred face splitting like a piece of overripe fruit. "Why are you surprised? You knew that when you met me." He ran off laughing. Evita almost went after him, but Kevin grabbed her by the arm and directed her eyes towards the river. "Look." Despite their bonds, Daraka and Shrihi had surfaced. It wasn't too late. They could still save them. As one, Evita and Kevin leapt from the bridge and dove into the water below. During the monsoon season, the waters of the Mahawali Ganga River were as dark as overbrewed tea and as fast-moving as a comet. Evita and Kevin surfaced as quickly as they could, but Daraka and Shrihi were already far downstream and sinking. The two were unable to use their bound arms and legs to try to fight against the rapids. Evita and Kevin raced through the churning waters, swimming as fast as they could, desperate to reach the middle-aged couple before they went under for good. The swift water was full of debris and waste. Kevin dodged around floating trash, car tires, discarded fishing nets, and clumps of empty drink bottles. The churning water pushed Daraka higher for a moment. She spotted Kevin and Evita, who looked like Pamela, and shouted, "Help! Daughter! Save us!" "We're coming," Evita choked back. Kevin drew his night dagger as he reached Shrihi and cut his bonds away. Kevin grabbed a passing log and wrapped Shrihi's arms around it to help keep the older man afloat. He looked around just in time to see Daraka slip below the water and not come back up. "I'll get her," Evita shouted, and dove under the water. The water was dark with silt and pollution. Evita tried to peer through the murk as she dove after Daraka. A flash of color and a swirl of fabric caught her eye among the debris. She shot forward, hand outstretched, and grabbed at it, but she only found she had a discarded shopping bag in her fingers. Lungs burning from holding her breath so long, Evita spun in circles. Had she lost Pamela's mother for good? Back on the surface, Kevin prepared to go after Evita. She had been underwater too long, and there had been no time to give her an underwater breathing pill to help her in her quest to rescue Daraka. Kevin had to hold Shrihi's arms around the log. The man was too weakened to do it himself. Going after Evita might mean Shrihi would drown, but Kevin had to risk it for the sake of the Foundation and the future of the Upper Realm. But suddenly, Evita surfaced, and Daraka was in her arms. Evita had done it. She had found Pamela's beloved mother and saved her. Too exhausted to do more than nod at each other, Kevin and Evita took firmer holds on their charges and swam for the shore. Once back at their apartment, Evita and Kevin wrapped Daraka and Shrihi in blankets. Kevin gave them hot tea dosed with herbal medicine to ensure they didn't become ill after their dip in the polluted river. Daraka and Shrihi didn't realize that Evita was not their beloved daughter Pamela and tried to shower her with praise and affection for saving them. But Evita's guilt was so great she could barely reply to their kind words. As soon as Daraka and Shrihi drifted off into naps, Kevin pulled Evita into the next room for a private talk. In his capacity as guardian of the test, it was Kevin's duty to guide and mentor the candidates to be the next keeper of the White Tower. Twice now, Evita had failed to deal with Mongo once and for all. In his private thoughts, Kevin was sure that this was why they were still here. Evita had yet to pass this particular test of the upper realm. Once in the next room, Evita curled into a ball of misery and failure. Kevin looked at the girl with gentleness. "Tell me what happened." "Why bother? I know I failed my last test, Kevin." Evita sank deeper into despair. "I'll never be the next keeper of the White Tower of the Upper Realm. Can't we just go back and tell Pamela, the real Pamela, that she won?" "Doesn't work like that," Kevin reminded her. "You and Pamela are not in competition against each other. Just because you drop out doesn't make her the automatic victor." "You mean neither of us could win and then there would be no next keeper?" Evita realized. Her eyes went wide in horror. Kevin also found the thought horrifying. If none of the candidates succeeded in the testing, there would be no one to replace the current keeper, Alohi, when she died. And her death was imminent, as Kevin and Evita both knew. In that case, the upper realm would fall. The lower realm and the pinnacle would have undue sway over the ordinary realm, and the foundation would fall. That included Kevin's beloved wife Lily and their unborn babies. Kevin knew he had to focus on Evita right now. "Tell me what happened with Mongo anyway," Kevin demanded. He wanted to get Evita thinking about solutions rather than failure. Evita sighed. "I knew I should have killed him or at least incapacitated him when I had the chance, but he begged for mercy. Then I had all these doubts. I mean, isn't it wrong to kill?" "Often it is," Kevin agreed. "You should always consider if you're actually killing for your own power or advantage. But sometimes the correct thing to do is to kill, especially when it's for the greater good." "I know the Upper Realm and the Foundation are counting on us," Evita said slowly. "I know how important they are, but if killing Mongo was what I should have done, why didn't it feel right?" Kevin remembered having this conversation with Pamela in the lower realm, and now he reached for the same words he had spoken to the warrior. Did it not feel right, or did it not feel easy? Kevin gently probed. Evita looked startled, then considered. "I know I could have killed him with my power blade. That would have been the easiest thing in the world," she thought some more. "But the decision definitely didn't feel comfortable. I'm not so sure about right. But shouldn't making the right choice also feel comfortable and easy because it's right?" Kevin could tell Evita's curiosity was helping her recover from her despair, the same way that it had helped Pamela. If the right thing were always comfortable and easy, no one would ever be tempted to make the wrong decision. For once, Evita acted like the teenager she was and rolled her eyes. "But then how can I know for sure what the right thing to do is?" Kevin remembered something he had told several of the other candidates at various times during the testing. He repeated it now. "Certainty is the luxury of despots and lunatics. You're neither, Evita. You have to make a choice and be willing to—" "What's that ticking noise?" Evita suddenly interrupted. Kevin stopped and listened. "It sounds like—" Kevin didn't even finish the obvious sentence. He and Evita scrambled to dig through the room's contents. At last, they uncovered the source of the ticking under a pile of blankets. It was a gray block of putty-like material wrapped in wires and attached to an old-fashioned alarm clock. Kevin instantly knew it for what it was: a bomb. Evita and Kevin tracked Mongo to the top of a bridge where he deceived Evita with pleas of regret, before he dumped Pamela's parents into the river. Kevin and Evita rescued them, and Kevin then advised Evita that her test was surely to kill evil Mongo, who has now planted a bomb in Pamela's parents' apartment building, which could kill dozens should it go off. Kevin and Evita stared in shock at the brick of plastic explosives that Kevin held in his hand. Is that a bomb?" Evita asked. "It's not a clock radio," Kevin quipped. He studied the wires, his mind quickly grasping the detonation method. He drew his night dagger and expertly cut the wires in the correct order to defuse the bomb. Evita's shoulders slumped, but not in relief. "It was Mongo who planted the bomb here, wasn't it?" Kevin nodded. "After we went into the river, Mongo would have had plenty of time to get back here to plant this bomb just in case we and Pamela's parents survived." "But that bomb would have blown up more than just Darika and Shrihi's apartment. It would have taken out the entire building and maybe a few more nearby. Hundreds of people could have been killed." Guilt swamped Evita. "And it would have been all my fault because I didn't kill Mongo when I had the chance." The enormity of her test was only now becoming clear to Evita. This was more than just facing down Mongo in the ring. His death was going to have to come at Evita's own hands. "Let's keep the fault where it would have truly lain, with Mongo," Kevin said sharply. "But fault is not the same as responsibility. Evita, are you ready to finally take out Mongo once and for all?" Evita squared her shoulders and raised her head. "Yes, I am, Kevin. Where should we start looking for him?" Kevin turned the brick of plastic explosive over in his hand. There was a logo of a construction company stamped into the bottom of it. It was a logo that Kevin had seen just recently. "I know right where we can find Mongo," he declared. It was dark by the time Kevin and Evita had searched the rest of the apartments in Darika and Shrihi's building and made sure there were no more explosives. Then Kevin directed Evita to follow him back into town. During their chase, when Mongo had kidnapped Pamela's parents, Kevin had driven around a road construction site. In the brief moments as they whipped by, Kevin had noticed the logo of the construction equipment. It matched the one on the plastic explosives. Kevin and Evita stepped into the construction zone. Bright lights flooded the area. "What are you doing here?" Mongo's unmistakable voice howled from behind the lights. "You were supposed to have drowned in the river." Evita stepped forward, but Kevin held her back. He had a plan for this encounter. Although Evita had said that she was ready to finally eliminate Mongo and his threats, Kevin wanted to stack the deck in her favor. It wasn't just Pamela's parents and their neighbors who were at risk. This entire scenario was also part of Evita's test to see if she would be the next keeper of the Upper Realm. The future of the Foundation and Kevin's family also hung in the balance. This was too important to leave to chance, and Kevin would use every strategy at his disposal to make sure Evita passed this challenge. "Don't you mean we were supposed to have been blown sky high?" Kevin retorted as he threw down the disarmed plastic explosives. Mongo stepped into the light, frustration clear on his pimply and scarred face. "Who the hell are you anyway?" he demanded of Kevin. "You're just this girl's trainer. Why do you keep interfering in what is none of your business?" "Because you're really not worth my fighter's time." Kevin dismissed Mongo with a shrug. "She has better things to do than get involved in some petty squabble over what should have been a warm-up match." "Kevin," hissed Evita, "stop it. You're just making him more angry." Kevin smiled. That was exactly what he was hoping to do. "A warm-up match?" Mongo's outrage was clear. "I am Mongo of the Kesba. I should be known as the greatest fighter in all of Sri Lanka. That title should not belong to some skinny girlie who's barely old enough to drive." "Please." Kevin rolled his eyes. "If you don't like getting beaten up by girls, you have no one but yourself to blame. My fighter is more of a warrior than you'll ever be. Go back to wherever it was that you came from and stop embarrassing yourself." Kevin's taunts worked. Mongo ignored Evita and charged directly at Kevin, leveled powers making his fist glow bright blue as he aimed the blow directly at Kevin's face. And Kevin did nothing. He didn't raise so much as a hand to block Mongo's punch. He let the force of the blow knock him over. Mongo stood over Kevin and refocused his power so it wafted into a long sword. Kevin knew the sword could easily decapitate him, but he hardly glanced at it. "Let's see how your fighter does without her pet trainer," Mongo taunted. Instead, he looked past Mongo to where Evita stood, horrified at the unexpected turn of events. "Remember what we talked about," Kevin gasped out to her. He half sat up and tossed his beloved night dagger to Evita. He didn't even see if she caught it. Mongo placed a heavy boot on Kevin's shoulder and shoved him back down. "Save your speeches for the afterlife," Mongo growled. "You'll both be there soon enough." He raised his leveled blade higher, ready to take off Kevin's head with one swing. But suddenly, Mongo froze with a strange sound that was half a question and half a gasp of surprise. "Urgh!" Then blood poured from Mongo's mouth. The long sword flickered out of being and he slumped to the ground, revealing Evita standing behind him, Kevin's bloody night dagger clutched in her hand. Evita's eyes were wide and hard. Kevin could see she was shaking, but he suspected it was from emotion and not physical strain. She held Mongo's eye with grim determination. She didn't look away for a moment as Mongo gasped out his last breath and died. Even then, Evita didn't move. She only kept staring at Mongo's lifeless body. "That's enough. It's over." Kevin gently pulled the night dagger from her grasp and cleaned it on the grass. Then he led Evita away from the dead man's body and helped her sit on a bench a dozen feet away. Once there, she collapsed into sobs and leaned on Kevin for support. Kevin patted her back in a fatherly way. Evita had not been the first candidate to have to pass the test of killing another person, but it was no less terrible for all that. Evita deserved all the comfort and understanding he could offer. "I did it," she finally sobbed out. "It wasn't easy. I didn't like it, but I killed him." Killing should never be easy or something to be enjoyed. Kevin thought back over the many deaths he had caused. Some had given him a grim kind of satisfaction, but he had never liked it or found it easy. They had simply been necessary. That was what Kevin had learned to keep his focus on. He knew that Evita would learn this too. As he comforted Evita, the world around them slowly dissolved in a whirling, spinning kaleidoscope of color and sound. The next thing they knew, Kevin and Evita were sitting on the floor of the Cave of Echoing Dreams. Besides them was the obsidian mirror Evita had chosen. Kevin picked it up. It was now cracked and the surface had gone dull. It no longer reflected anything now that its purpose had been served. Pamela and Walter were looking at them with concern. "Kevin, Evita, are you okay? You've been gone for hours." They hurried to help Kevin and Evita to their feet, but neither of them needed assistance. Kevin could see a change had come over Evita. She now stood taller and with more authority. "We're fine," she assured Pamela and Walter in a voice that reminded Kevin of Elohi's. Walter looked from Pamela to Evita. The tween gaming prodigy had realized it wasn't his fate to become the next keeper after he had nearly gotten his friends killed in a volcano. However, his friends refused to abandon Walter, so he accompanied them as Evita and Pamela continued with the testing. "So," Walter finally prompted, "did you pass your test, Evita?" Evita slowly nodded. "I did, and I still believe becoming the next keeper of the White Tower may be my fate." She looked directly at Pamela. "What about you, Pamela?" After a long search, Kevin and the two remaining candidates to be the next keeper of the White Tower of the Upper Realm, Evita, the politician from Tierra del Fuego, and Pamela, the warrior from Sri Lanka, finally located the mysterious arena Elohi had told them to look for. The arena turned out to be the Cave of Echoing Dreams, which Kevin had visited before. Evita had passed her next test, facing down and killing Mongo, the fighter who then preyed on Pamela's parents in an act of revenge. So everyone looked to Pamela to see if she was willing to continue with the testing. Pamela felt the eyes of her three friends on her. She stood a little taller. "Yes," she declared, "I still believe becoming the next keeper of the White Tower may be my fate. Whatever my next test is, whatever battle I must fight, I'm ready and willing to do so." In his private thoughts, Kevin believed that Pamela's next test might have nothing at all to do with fighting. Pamela, a leveled warrior, had already done plenty of fighting during the tests. However, Evita's last test challenged the diplomat to become a woman of action, the area in which she was weakest. Pamela had no trouble fighting, so Kevin suspected her test very well may require her to do the opposite. But all Kevin knew for sure was that he would be with Pamela every step of the way in the capacity as guardian of the test. He would continue to be her mentor and advisor. "When you're ready, select a mirror." Kevin nodded to the thousands of obsidian mirrors that filled the Cave of Echoing Dreams. Walter gave Pamela's hand an encouraging squeeze. Since Walter had removed himself from the testing, Kevin had been pleased to see that the stoic Pamela had discovered a new maternal side to her gruff warrior self. She had taken special care of the preteen. It showed Pamela was capable of the full range of skills the next keeper of the White Tower would need to succeed. "Good luck," Walter whispered to Pamela. "Thanks," Pamela smiled back at him. Pamela carefully looked over the array of obsidian mirrors. Each one gave her reflection back to her, but none called to her more than the others. "They all seem to be the same to me," she finally admitted. Pamela glanced at Evita. Although Evita was younger than Pamela by a year, Evita seemed older and wiser since she had returned from her last test. "Didn't you say something about how you needed to be okay with uncertainty to pick your mirror?" Evita nodded. "Exactly so." "If you can do it, so can I," Pamela declared. She stepped forward and reached for the nearest mirror. Once again, Kevin stepped with her and placed a fatherly hand on her shoulder just as her fingers brushed the surface of the mirror. Pamela never even took hold of the mirror. Instead, she and Kevin were sucked inside of it in a whirring, spinning kaleidoscope of color and sound. The next thing Pamela knew, she was standing beside a battered farm truck stopped on a dirt track in the middle of a wide plain of dead grass. It was hot and the sky was a burnt blue above her. The air was so dry it felt like it hadn't rained in months. "What?" Pamela squawked in surprise. She felt strange and clumsy, like she didn't know how her body fit together. For an athletic warrior like Pamela, it was about as unsettling as a feeling could get. She looked down at her body, except it wasn't her body. It was shorter and rounder. She grabbed the side mirror of the truck and wrenched it so she could look at her face. Except it wasn't her face. It was Evita's. Pamela was so stunned by her guise as Evita that the gunshots didn't even register in her conscious mind. Suddenly, something hit her like a ton of bricks, knocking her to the ground. Whoever attacked her dragged her under cover beneath the truck as more bullets flew over their heads. "Stay down!" A familiar voice roared in her ear. Trapped under the truck, Pamela turned her head just enough to see who had just saved her life. It was Kevin. "What's going on?" Pamela demanded. "Why do I suddenly look like Evita?" "Because you are Evita," Kevin shot back. "This is your test." He peered out from under the truck, trying to tell where the gunfire was coming from. His sharp eyes caught the muzzle flashes from the ridge above the road. The gunfire paused. A voice called down to them. "We told you not to come back on our property, Evita." Pamela didn't react. Kevin gave her a nudge, reminding Pamela that, as far as anybody else was concerned, she was Evita. "Oh, right," Pamela grumbled. She cleared her throat and called back. You couldn't have just put up a no trespassing sign, could you? Gunfire isn't very neighborly, you know." An outraged growl came back from the ridge. "Don't talk to me about being neighborly, Evita. You know what your parents did." Pamela looked to Kevin for an explanation. He shook his head to show that he had no idea what was going on. When he and Evita left Evita's hometown in Tierra del Fuego, everything was peaceful in the cattle-grazing pampas thanks to Evita's work as mayor. The voice from the ridge continued. "The Garcias won't be taken advantage of. We'll defend our water to the last family member standing." "Garcia?" Pamela thought hard, but the gunfire had started again. The bullets bouncing off the farm truck made it hard for her to think. The Garcia family and Evita's family used to be rivals, like the Hatfields and the McCoys, but only with cows instead of pigs, Kevin explained. "No use to be about it," Pamela pointed out as a bullet kicked up dust into her face from just inches away. She coughed reflexively. Kevin had to give the warrior girl credit. She was cool under gunfire and not prone to panic. "But I remember Evita telling me something else," Pamela continued once she got over her coughing fit. "There was a boy, right?" "That's right. His name was Caval. He and Evita were sweethearts, although their parents were always fighting. At least Evita got to have a sweetheart, Pamela grumbled. Kevin was surprised. 17-year-old Pamela was so stoic she never complained, but he realized it would have been natural for her to want to date and to have a relationship with someone her own age. But fighting in underground mixed martial arts clubs and fending off kidnappers wouldn't have given Pamela many opportunities to meet suitable romantic partners, even if she found one who wasn't intimidated by her fierce reputation. But if Evita and Cavall were dating, doesn't that make them more like Romeo and Juliet than the Hatfields and McCoys? She asked Kevin. I hope not. They both ducked as the Garcias reloaded their weapons and unleashed a fresh barrage of gunfire. Romeo and Juliet didn't end well for the kids, remember? Kevin finished. Good point, Pamela replied. It's so unfair when kids have to suffer just because the grown-ups can't act like grown-ups. Someone needs to knock some sense into this Garcia family before someone really gets hurt. Pamela got a stubborn look on her face, or rather, Evita's face. Evita was normally so calm and peaceful, Kevin found the expression unsettling, which was probably why he was too distracted to stop her when Pamela tried to leap from under the truck the next time the Garcias paused to reload. Pamela, wait! Kevin yelled after her but was ignored. Pamela's leap was more of a stumble. Evita was a farm kid and no athletic slouch, but she didn't have Pamela's finely honed reflexes. Pamela regained her balance and stood tall. Like Kevin, she had located their attackers by the muzzle flashes from the guns. They were hiding behind a ridge overlooking the road. Pamela was sure that a leveled blast of her warrior's power would send that part of the ridge crumbling into dust. Without any cover, the Garcias would surely run away. Pamela reached into herself and found her levels. She whirled around in her signature move that had made her famous in Sri Lankan underground fight clubs. Normally, a ripple of blue-leveled energy would have flown from her hair and taken out almost anything in its path. But something went wrong, very wrong. Pamela felt the energy building in her. She felt it fly from her body. But there was no blue light, no sense of righteous, furious power. Instead, the energy flowing from her was softer, slower, and completely invisible. It hit the ridge and nothing happened. Pamela stared in shock. She had been born with levels. They had never failed her, ever. Pamela, Kevin called again from under the cover of the old farm truck. You don't have your warrior powers here. You're Evita now. You have her powers. Pamela froze in horror. Evita's powers were tied to her abilities as a diplomat and a politician. They helped bring people together. On my signal, we opened fire all together, the voice behind the ridge yelled. Pamela realized the only thing her levels had accomplished was helping her enemies coordinate so that they could better murder her. When Pamela chose a mirror from among the thousands in the Cave of Echoing Dreams, she and Kevin were suddenly transported to Tierra del Fuego. Pamela realized she was now in Evita's body and no longer had her warrior powers. Worse, enemies of Evita's family had declared an all-out range war. Kevin bit back a groan. He was still under the cover of an old farm truck, but Pamela in Evita's body was standing completely exposed in the middle of the dirt road. The Garcia family, who were enemies of Evita's family, would have a perfectly clear shot at her from where they hid behind the ridgeline above them. Pamela had tried to blast them with her warrior levels, but had forgotten she was now, for all intents and purposes, Evita. Evita's levels helped people work together, and now the Garcias were coordinating Pamela's murder. Kevin prepared to hurl himself from cover and tackle Pamela to the ground, even if it meant taking a bullet himself. Kevin was the guardian of the test. It was his responsibility to mentor and guide the candidates, but also to protect them from any serious injuries. The entire future of the Upper Realm and the Foundation could depend on Pamela's survival. Shoot her on the count of 3, the voice over the ridge called out. 1, 2. The speaker never finished his count. He was distracted by the muddy Land Rover that came skidding around a nearby curve and headed directly for Pamela. Pamela threw up her arms as if they could fend off a crash, but the Land Rover screeched to a stop. The driver threw open his door and yelled, Get in! Get in now, Evita!" Pamela just blinked, not recognizing the driver. But Kevin instantly knew who he was. It was Caval. Caval was the son of the Garcias, but he and Evita were sweethearts despite their parents' constant worry. In a flash of his finely honed reflexes, Kevin was out from under the truck. He grabbed Pamela and dragged them both into the Land Rover. Right before Kevin slammed the door, he heard one of the Garcias yell, "It's Caval! Follow them!" Caval slammed his foot down on the accelerator and they sped away down the dirt road. Caval looked at Pamela. "I didn't think you'd be back so soon. I thought you were going to attend that fancy Williams school in America." Pamela shot Kevin a look, unsure how to respond. "I am just back for a quick visit," she finally tried. "I thought maybe you heard about all the trouble here and came back to help." Caval sounded disappointed. Pamela said nothing, so Kevin took over. "We had heard rumors, that's why I accompanied Evita back here. But I don't know if we have the full picture. Why don't you tell us what's been going on so we can have the full story?" Caval nodded to show he thought Kevin's idea was a good one. "It all started 2 months ago," he began. "That's when we realized we were really in a drought. All the ranchers got together and made a plan to deal with water rights so everybody could have enough water for their cattle until the drought ended." "That sounds like a sensible plan," Kevin interjected. "It should have been," Caval nodded. "As you know, my family and Evita's family have ranches that are close together. There's a stream that runs from a lake on my family's land down to their land. My family agreed to keep the water flowing and not dam it off if Evita's family continued to give them access to a road that ran across their land. That way, my family could get their cattle to market." "So what went wrong?" Pamela found herself curious about the situation. She had heard about some of these issues from Evita herself. Now Pamela was rapidly putting together a picture of the situation. "I'm not entirely sure," Caval sighed as he directed his story now to his friend Evita. "I went out of town to visit some cousins, but by the time I got back, a full-blown range war was going on. My family has blocked up the stream entirely so your family's ranch isn't getting any water, and their cows are suffering. But your dad also blocked off the road running through his land. My family has no way to get their cattle to market. Nobody will tell me who reneged on the agreement first, so I don't know who's to blame or how to stop the fighting." "But aren't you the mayor?" Pamela asked, remembering that Evita had mentioned Caval had taken over when Evita had left. Then Pamela remembered she was actually supposed to be Evita herself. "I mean, you are the mayor," she quickly corrected. "Can't you make them stop fighting?" "I wish." Caval gripped the steering wheel harder. "I might have all the power of the town's government, but I'm still only one person. I can't be everywhere at once." "This sounds like just the kind of problem Evita can help you with." Kevin glanced at Pamela to make sure she understood his meaning. Resolving this range war had to be her test to see if she would be the next keeper of the White Tower. Pamela nodded to show she understood, but she looked green with nerves. Diplomacy had never been her strongest suit, but Kevin knew Pamela was determined and dedicated. She would try her best not to give up. He had to hope it would be enough, especially since... "It looks like your family is following us," Kevin warned Caval. Caval glanced back. "Oh boy, I was hoping I could get you and Evita back to her family's home before they caught up with us." He pressed the Land Rover to go faster over the dirt road. "Better yet, time it so they catch up with us right when we arrive at Evita's home," Kevin suggested. "Why would we want to do that?" Pamela wondered, shocked. "Because then you'll have your family and Caval's family in the same place, so you can start untangling this mess," Kevin pointed out. "Oh, yeah. Right." Pamela took a deep breath. "No time like the present, I guess." Caval's timing was excellent. He pulled up outside Evita's family home moments before his parents caught up with them. Evita's father, Reggio, came running from the house with a shotgun in his hand. "Evita, what are you doing here? We didn't expect you." "Hi, Papa?" Pamela offered, trying to remember if Evita ever mentioned what she called her father. "Your mother will be so happy to see you, but you must come inside. It's not safe. There's a..." Reggio cut himself off as he noticed that Cavall was the driver of the Land Rover. He aimed his shotgun at Cavall, who threw up his hands. "Evita, what are you doing with this son of a snake?" But that is when the Garcias came speeding into the yard. Cavall's parents leapt from their car with shotguns of their own at the ready. "Cavall, how dare you help this daughter of a rat escape our wrath?" Mr. Garcia howled. Reggio turned his gun on the Garcias. "Get off my property, you two-faced, water-stealing varmint!" Ranch hands came running from the house, also with firearms. Several other trucks pulled up with men who worked for the Garcias. They, too, were armed to the teeth. Reggio and Mr. Garcia flung insults back and forth at each other. Kevin could see fingers tightening on the triggers on both sides. He looked at Pamela. She took a deep breath and nodded. "Excuse me," she said, trying for Evita's placating tones. "Excuse me," but the two men continued to trade insults and ignored her completely. "You're nothing but a water rustler with the manners of a stampeding buffalo. Shame on you for stealing another cow's water, you low-down craven cowpoke," roared Reggio. "Mr. Highfalutin over here closing roads as if he's some kind of traffic king," shot back Mr. Garcia. "Oh, color me impressed. I bet the whole town is quaking in their boots at the thought of you running for traffic warden when you're too dumb to think your way out of a roundabout." "Hey!" Pamela tried to interject as she made a first stab at what she thought was political diplomacy. "Could you please just, hey, that's not necessary. There's no need for insults." But Reggio and Mr. Garcia both seemed to think insults were very necessary because they kept flinging them back and forth like cow patties. "You reek like the rear end of a donkey after a marathon in a swamp, you sorry excuse for a business rival," Mr. Garcia bellowed. "I'd rather shove my nose in a pile of manure than have to suffer through the stench of your presence one more time." Reggio turned red with rage. "At least I don't look like the back end of a donkey. You're so hideous that other people need to wear shades. Even a paper bag over your head won't block out the glare of that kind of ugly." The louder Pamela shouted for them to stop insulting each other, the louder the two men yelled. Their ranch hands joined in, screaming at each other until no one could be heard clearly. The tension between the two factions ratcheted up with every passing second. Finally, Pamela gave a wild screech of frustration. Kevin moved to offer her guidance and mentorship as her guardian of the test, but before he could, Pamela snatched a shotgun from a nearby man, pointed it at the sky, and fired. "Shut up!" Pamela screamed into the shocked silence. But instead, both sides took aim and opened fire. Pamela realized she was suddenly in Evita's body and deposited in Evita's tiny hamlet, where Pamela no longer had her warrior powers, which meant she had to harness and adapt to Evita's political levels. Worse, enemies of Evita's family had declared an all-out range war. When both sides refused to listen, Pamela accidentally started a gun battle. Kevin tackled Pamela to the ground as Reggio, the Garcias, and both sets of ranch hands opened fire. Reggio and Mr. Garcia's verbal sparring had been tense, but Pamela firing off a shotgun in frustration had been like a match to a powder keg. Chaos reigned as Kevin and Pamela commando crawled for safety under Reggio's front porch. The air was thick with gun smoke and the cries of injured men as bullets tore through their bodies. Achieving the safety of the porch, Kevin and Pamela looked out. Kevin was glad to see Cavall, Evita's sweetheart and scion of the Garcia clan, had taken cover behind his Range Rover. "How do I stop them?" Pamela begged Kevin. "I know this is my fault. How do I make them stop shooting each other?" "You have to use Evita's levels," Kevin yelled over the gunfire. "Find a way to channel her levels so people cooperate rather than fight with each other." Pamela considered reaching for Evita's levels, which she could feel inside her, but then she shook her head. "I don't know how to use Evita's levels," she finally confessed. "What if I just make them better at cooperating to kill each other?" Kevin could understand Pamela's concern. Although the leveled warrior had taken a secluded valley assassin's life, there was a big difference between being responsible for one life and being responsible for many deaths. Kevin formulated his answer, but by the time he turned back to Pamela, he realized she was crawling back further under the house. "Where are you going?" he demanded. "I can't do this, Kevin," Pamela said, biting back sobs. "I'm sorry, but I'm pretty sure the only thing that could stop this gunfight is an act of God." Lightning flashed across skies that just a short time ago were clear. Rain poured from black clouds in buckets. The gunfighters stopped fighting and looked up at the sky in amazement. "The drought is over," Reggio yelled. "Quick, men," Mr. Garcia shouted to his cowhands. "We have to get back to the ranch and make sure our dam holds." Within seconds, the Garcias and their crew had scooped up their dead and injured, piled them back into their vehicles, and raced off. With no one to fight, Reggio and his ranch hands lowered their weapons and went to work, attending to their dead and dying. Kevin urged Pamela to follow him as he crawled out from under the house. Already the rain was tapering to a drizzle. In his private thoughts, Kevin wondered if Pamela had somehow tapped into weather working levels similar to those of Majid, the teen from the Maldives. He knew the ultimate keeper of the White Tower would need to master all of the facets of leveled power. But a glance at Pamela's lost and stricken face made him reconsider. Perhaps the upper realm was only giving Pamela the opportunity for a do-over. Pamela was appalled by the destruction she saw when she re-emerged into the yard. It was a muddy, bloody mess. Several men were dead. Half a dozen more had serious gunshot wounds. Kevin could see what she was thinking by the look on her face. "Not now," he said sharply. "Now we do what we can for those that are hurt. We'll talk about the rest later." Pamela nodded, relieved to put off the inevitable. Hours later, Kevin had used the contents of his trusty satchel to heal those he could. Thanks to his help, Kevin was sure that they would all make a full recovery. It was dark by then, and Kevin and Pamela saw that there was no more work to be done to tend the injured ranch hands. They retreated to the back porch, which looked down on the little town where Evita had once been mayor. "You don't have to tell me," Pamela began. "I know I failed my test." Kevin spread his hands, indicating their surroundings. "We're still here, so the upper realm must still think you have a chance to turn this situation around. The test isn't quitting on you. But are you quitting on the test, Pamela?" Pamela considered. She knew she could quit the testing at any time. She would quit if she felt sure it wasn't her destiny to become the next keeper of the White Tower. She searched her heart for that surety and didn't find it. "I'm not quitting, Kevin," Pamela declared. "But I don't have the first idea how to make people stop fighting with each other." "People are going to fight," Kevin pointed out. "That's human nature. Not even your levels will stop that. Your job is to make sure the conflict is a constructive one, instead of a destructive one like a gun battle," Pamela nodded. "Exactly," Kevin agreed. "I get what you're saying." Pamela looked down at her hands, or rather at Evita's hands. They were smaller than Pamela's and didn't have any of Pamela's battle scars. "It sounds like I need to find a way to get Evita's and Caval's dads to work out their differences in some way that doesn't involve guns and physical violence." Pamela considered several scenarios. "And it would probably help if it was just the two of them, without their ranch hands egging them on." "And it would be good if you keep your temper," Kevin added. After all, Pamela had been the one to fire the first shot that had set off the gunfight, even if she herself had only fired into the air. "But how can I bring them together?" Pamela wondered aloud. "They don't have anything in common, and after today I doubt they'd agree to any kind of meeting, much less leave their men behind and come unarmed." "So then maybe you need to trick them into coming together," Kevin pointed out. Pamela looked surprised. "Isn't diplomacy against the idea of trickery and dishonesty?" Kevin laughed. "Not at all. Diplomacy is simply the trick of getting people to look at the same thing in the same way. You present an idea and trick both parties into seeing it as good for them. The idea is actually good for both of them. That's no trick. But getting them to both see it that way, that's the hard part. Pamela still looked confused. Here's an example, Kevin continued. There was an ancient queen who brought two of her warring lords together to get them to stop fighting each other. Their fight was stupid and pointless and just cost both lords time, money, and the lives of their men. But the queen had a problem. Whichever lord came into her presence in her throne room first would assume he had greater standing. Then the other lord would be angry before negotiations began. So you know what she did? Pamela considered. Added a second door to the room so both lords could enter at once? Kevin looked surprised. No, but that would have been another solution. See, you're thinking like a diplomat already. Pamela tried not to look too pleased. What was the queen's solution? She allowed the lords to go into the throne room as soon as they arrived, but she wasn't there. She entered after the lord, so technically, neither came into her presence before the other, Kevin smiled. It was a simple thing, but it solved the problem and allowed the lords to begin the peace talks on common ground. Pamela snapped her fingers. Common ground? That's what Mr. Garcia and Evita's dad need. What do they both have in common? Kevin looked down at the lights of the town. Did Evita ever tell you about ice cream diplomacy? The day was very hot and bright. Yesterday's rainstorm had apparently been a fluke and didn't even put a dent in the drought conditions. Everywhere the grass was still dried and dead, but that did mean it was the perfect weather for ice cream. Pamela asked Reggio to go into town with her and Kevin. Please take us, Papa. I've really missed our ice cream since I've been away. Pamela pleaded while making big sad eyes at Reggio, who had no idea this wasn't actually his daughter. Well, since it will make my daughter happy, Reggio finally gave in. Half an hour later, Reggio, Pamela, and Kevin walked into the town's ice cream parlor, only to find Caval and Mr. Garcia already there. You! Reggio and Mr. Garcia yelled at the same time and reached for their weapons, which their children had convinced them to leave at home for a simple trip for ice cream. The men groped at their empty holsters while Kevin locked the door and Pamela and Caval took stances in front of it. By pre-arrangement with the ice cream parlor's owner, no one else was there. What's the big idea? Mr. Garcia demanded. Move aside, Evita. I won't stay in the same place as this smelly rat for another minute, Reggio roared. Pamela looked from Reggio to Mr. Garcia. She reached within herself and sent out a wave of leveled power at them, not like she would with her warrior levels in a powerful attack, but like Evita would, like a gentle smile. She and Kevin had practiced this last night on one of Reggio's more problematic steers until the animal had been mooing contentedly. Pamela spoke in a gentle voice, looking from one man to the other. Until the two of you work your differences out and declare a truce, neither of you is leaving this ice cream parlor. Pamela's rash actions when she first discovered she was in Evita's body and overseeing a turf war in Tierra del Fuego led to carnage, and to Pamela's despair. Kevin convinced her she had not yet failed her test to be the new keeper of the White Tower in the Upper Realm and urged her to bring together Evita's father and Mr. Garcia in forced talks that would lead to a truce. Evita's father, Reggio, and Mr. Garcia stared in shock at the three people blocking their exit from the ice cream parlor. You can't hold us prisoners here, Reggio protested. I'm not putting up with this bullshit, Mr. Garcia snarled at the same time. Kevin, Caval, and Pamela just crossed their arms and continued to block the door. Caval was Mr. Garcia's son and had taken over as mayor when Evita had left. Pamela currently looked like Evita and even had Evita's level diplomatic powers rather than her own usual fighting abilities. The two of you aren't leaving until you work your differences out and find a way to end this range war, Pamela demanded. Things have gone too far. People are dead and both your ranches are suffering. Put aside your petty squabbles and be nice, or I'll crack your heads together like a couple of walnuts. That last part might not have been exactly diplomatic, Kevin pointed out. Indeed, Pamela's heart sank as she realized her mistake. Mr. Garcia immediately started yelling at Pamela for threatening him. Reggio yelled at Mr. Garcia for threatening his daughter. Mr. Garcia yelled back at Reggio, and both of them occasionally yelled at Pamela or Caval for working with the enemy and holding their own fathers hostage. There was so much yelling that it quickly became impossible for anyone to hear anything that was being said. Kevin saw Pamela rubbing her temples, obviously trying to think over the din and not having much luck. He could see her temper was also rising, and Pamela never had a good hold on her temper at the best of times. Kevin went behind the counter of the ice cream parlor and found just what he needed. He returned with an empty 3-gallon metal ice cream container and an ice cream scoop. He then jumped up on the counter and banged the ice cream scoop against the metal container. Kevin kept on banging until all the arguments died away and everyone stared at him in shock. Pamela sighed in relief. Finally, I can think. She turned a glare on Reggio and Mr. Garcia. Listen up, you stubborn donkey butts. I've dealt with crybaby opponents and strutting twits before, but you, Papa, and you, Mr. Garcia, take the prize for being the most annoying waste of space I've ever encountered. Your constant bickering and petty arguing make my ears bleed. It's about as useful as a couple of fish with a bicycle. And I'm sick of your constant babbling. Now shut your mouths and open your ears before I lose my last bit of patience with you two. You worthless excuses for adult human beings. Mr. Garcia and Reggio stared at Pamela and then looked at each other. Is this really that sweet little daughter of yours? Mr. Garcia asked. What the hell have they been teaching her in that school in America? Reggio wondered. He was just as shocked at his daughter's behavior as Mr. Garcia was. Hey, Pamela snapped. Mouths closed, ears open. Remember? Forget again and I'll shove something in your mouth so you won't forget. I hope it's at least ice cream, Mr. Garcia grumbled. Yeah, I'm starving, Reggio added. Kevin came around the counter and gave Pamela a nudge. Good work. What do you mean, Kevin? Pamela rubbed her head again. All I've succeeded in doing is losing my temper and yelling at them again. That's not all, Kevin pointed out. Reggio and Mr. Garcia just agreed on something for the first time. Pamela's head shot up. You're right, but it was just ice cream. I can't really stop a range war with a frozen dessert. Or can I? Kevin gave her a mysterious smile just like his own mentor, the Night King. From small trees, big things can grow. Now that they agree on something, how can you leverage that? Pamela considered. Before, they both wanted to talk and neither wanted to listen. Now they both also want to eat, but they can't do both at once, talk and eat. Kevin nodded, knowing she was on the right track. Pamela turned back to the men. Okay, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to flip a coin. Whoever calls the coin toss gets to pick if they want to eat ice cream first or talk first. Whichever option isn't chosen, the other person gets to do it. Mr. Garcia and Reggio blinked at each other. You mean one of us gets to talk uninterrupted while the other gets to eat and listen? That's right, Pamela confirmed. The talker gets to talk as long as the eater is eating the ice cream. Then you switch and give the other person a turn. But what's to stop the eater from bolting down the ice cream so the talker doesn't get enough time to talk? Reggio asked. Self-preservation, Kevin smiled. Eat ice cream too fast. What do you get? An ice cream headache, Caval chimed in. Evita, you're brilliant. Caval threw an adoring look at Pamela, who blushed. She didn't want Caval to confuse her with the real Evita since he and Evita had been sweethearts, but it was still nice to know he appreciated her ideas. Mr. Garcia won the coin toss, and after an internal debate with himself, his stomach won out over his pride. Kevin fixed him a 2-scoop cone to order, and the two men sat down at a table. This is where your levels would come in handy, just to help the process along, Kevin hinted to Pamela. She nodded and sent out gentle waves of level power to encourage the men to work out their differences. While Mr. Garcia licked slowly away at his ice cream cone, Reggio spoke of how happy and relieved he'd been when the ranches had made a plan to deal with the drought. Without a water source on his own land, he'd been worried for his cattle's welfare and health, which he took very seriously. But when the Garcias dammed the creek overnight, a herd of thirsty cattle had stampeded along the road and torn it all up in their search for water. Reggio was so furious with the Garcias for going back on their word he didn't even think about the road. He had only charged up to the Garcias' house ready to demand an explanation. But instead of sense and reasonableness, he was met with a shotgun, and Mr. Garcia screamed about how he, Reggio, had gone back on his word and torn up the road the Garcias needed to get their cattle to town. Reggio was so furious at the unfair and ridiculous accusations he had stormed off. The range war devolved from there. Now, people were dead and Reggio was consumed with guilt and grief but didn't know how the war could ever end. Kevin could see that many times Mr. Garcia was outraged and wanted to contradict Reggio's story and argue. But each time he looked up from his ice cream, Pamela would send another wave of power over the men, and Mr. Garcia would remember his promise and hold his tongue, when he wasn't using it to lick up dripping ice cream. With perfect timing, Reggio ran out of words just as Mr. Garcia came to the end of his cone and popped the last bite in his mouth. "Thank you, Papa. Thank you, Mr. Garcia. You both did splendidly." Pamela lavished praise on them both. "Now, Papa, what kind of ice cream do you want while Mr. Garcia gets his turn to talk?" Kevin fixed Reggio a cone with 2 scoops to order, and Mr. Garcia launched into his speech. Mr. Garcia wasn't popular with the other ranchers due to his past misdeeds and was suffering from his ranch's isolation. When Reggio agreed that the Garcias could use the road, Mr. Garcia was relieved. His ranch wouldn't survive if he couldn't get his product to market, and he had many employees and families who depended on him. But the first time the Garcias tried to use the road to get their cattle to town, they found Reggio had deliberately torn the road up. The cattle trucks couldn't get through and were stranded for hours with the poor cows trapped in their hot trailers. Then when Mr. Garcia finally got home, he was told part of the creek bed had collapsed the night before and caused the stream to flood one of his best grazing fields. Mr. Garcia would need to build an expensive dam system to prevent flooding in the future. To top off a truly terrible day, Reggio turned up acting like a crazy person, ranting and raving. Was there any wonder Mr. Garcia had grabbed his shotgun to defend himself? The range war devolved from there. Now people were dead and Mr. Garcia felt terrible and worried for his ranch and his employees. He also didn't know how the war could ever end. Pamela kept watch on the pair, but the more they communicated, the less they needed her levels to keep them calm and cooperative. "So you didn't mean to close off the creek?" Reggio asked once his ice cream was gone and Mr. Garcia finished talking. "No. And you didn't tear up the road on purpose?" Mr. Garcia asked. Reggio shook his head. "I guess we both overreacted," Mr. Garcia sighed. "If only we'd stopped and listened, so much violence could have been averted." Privately, Kevin thought that Mr. Garcia's past bad behavior had also contributed to the problem, but decided that pointing that out wouldn't be helpful. "Now that you've agreed on that," Pamela cut in, "you can shake hands and make a plan to repair both the road and the creek bed." Reggio and Mr. Garcia graciously, if stickily, shook hands. Pamela smiled at Kevin. "Looks like our work is done here and we can—" But just then, Cavall ran into the ice cream parlor. Pamela hadn't even realized he'd left. "Fire!" Cavall yelled. "There's a wildfire raging out of control over the pampas, and it's heading right for town." Kevin helped Pamela in Evita's body to tap into Evita's leveled skills and oversee a bit of ice cream diplomacy as she brought together Reggio and Mr. Garcia to air their grievances and forge a truce in their ongoing water war. Just as the two men put aside their differences, Cavall burst in to relate a wildfire was heading straight for the town. "Fire?" Kevin exclaimed in horror. This entire area of Tierra del Fuego had been suffering under a drought for months. The normally lush pampas were now just miles of standing tinder, ripe to stoke a wildfire to an unstoppable blaze. How far from town is the fire? Kevin demanded to know from Cavall, who had just run into the ice cream parlor to tell them about the blaze. Pamela, her father Reggio, and Cavall's father Mr. Garcia gathered around Kevin, preparing themselves to hear the worst. Less than half a mile, and it's moving fast. It's destroying everything in its wake in a matter of seconds, and the winds are whipping it to greater strength, Cavall reported breathlessly. Do something. You're the mayor, boy, Reggio reminded the teen. Cavall had taken over as the mayor after Evita had left for the upper realm, though her friends and family thought she was just attending the Williams School in Washington, D.C. I know, Cavall paced back and forth, wringing his hands and racked with indecision. I called out the volunteer fire brigade already. Now I should start evacuating the town or calling up the emergency water reserves? Wait, but I'm the only one with the keys to the town's plow, and we should form a fire break between the pampas and the town. But I also have to notify the regional authorities to send help and... Pamela leaned into Kevin. The mayor is supposed to do all of that at once? That's the way the town is set up. The mayor has all the power, but he also has all the responsibility, Kevin replied while watching Cavall work himself into a lather of pressure and indecision. He was proud to see that Pamela immediately stepped up and placed a calming hand on Cavall's shoulder. Her hand glowed a faint blue as she sent waves of calm to Evita's sweetheart. Take a breath, Cavall, Pamela told him. You're not alone. We can work together and make sure the town stays safe. Cavall immediately stopped pacing. Thank you, Evita. I don't know how you handled everything when you were mayor. Pamela suddenly remembered Cavall still thought she was Evita. She snatched her hand back. Well, I never had to deal with a wildfire, did I? It doesn't matter. Let's just get to work. I noticed a dry stream bed just outside of town. Is there any way we can get water into it? It would help stop the fire. Cavall and Reggio turned their eyes on Mr. Garcia. Actually, that's part of the stream I dammed off. Then you better undam it, Pamela ordered. Mr. Garcia suddenly looked shifty. But there's still a drought, and we don't know how long it will last. Maybe I'll need that water in the future. Maybe we can stop the fire some other way. Kevin could see that Pamela wanted to scream at Mr. Garcia's sudden reversion to his usual petty, self-serving ways, but instead Pamela smiled and sent out Evita's levels to Mr. Garcia. Mr. Garcia, she said sweetly, I know everyone would be so impressed and grateful if you would generously release your water stores to save the town. I'm sure it would go a long way to restoring you to their good graces. Kevin shot a look at Reggio, who was glowering at Mr. Garcia again. Especially since you've just found out how difficult it will be for your ranch to survive without the cooperation of others, Kevin added. Right, of course, Mr. Garcia stood straighter. We all must work together, cooperation and all that. Good, Reggio clapped Mr. Garcia on the back. We can take my car back to your ranch and get that dam opened up and the water flowing. Mr. Garcia wanted to argue, but another level blast from Pamela had him following Reggio meekly as a lamb. We better see how we can help too, Kevin added. Kevin, Pamela, and Cavall ran into the street. There, everything was chaos. People were running in all directions. Some people were trying to evacuate with what looked like everything they owned. Other people were running toward the fire armed with nothing more than buckets and damp mops. A fire engine was pulled up next to a hydrant, but the volunteers couldn't figure out how to start the water flowing. Across the street, several people hammered on the doors to the municipal shed to no avail. Fights and scuffles were breaking out like mini-fires all over town. People were shouting and even throwing punches on the smallest pretext. And all the time, the fire was drawing closer. Already, Kevin could see a line of flames racing toward the town in the distance. The sky overhead had gone black with smoke. If they didn't do something fast, the town and everyone in it could be burnt to cinders. Kevin looked at Pamela. You know what to do. Pamela glanced over all the people and looked nervous. I've never tried to use Evita's powers on this many people at once. You can do it, he assured her. It's the same thing you've been doing, just on a larger scale. Pamela still looked doubtful, but she closed her eyes. She reached deep within herself and found Evita's powers. She channeled them up her body and down her arms, which she flung out as wide as she could. A shock wave of blue-leveled power rolled out over the town. People suddenly stopped fighting, stopped arguing, stopped panicking, stopped running away. Suddenly, all eyes were on Pamela. Pamela gulped audibly, but she jumped up on a nearby bench. "Okay, everyone," she called. "Gather round. We're going to get organized, we're going to work together, and we're going to stop that fire." The townspeople, still under the effect of her wave of level energy, gathered around Pamela, ready and willing to do whatever they could. Pamela consulted with Cavall. He still felt he should do everything himself, but Pamela forcibly took his ring of keys and tossed them to the people who had been trying to get into the municipal storage shed. "You," she said while pointing to one frantic group, "get those plows and use them to create a fire break between the fire and the town. Make it as wide as you can, but don't risk your lives." The group trotted off. "My keys!" Cavall exclaimed. "Evita, you took my keys to the city!" Pamela realized Cavall had reached the end of his capacity despite all of her leveled powers could do to help him. He was seconds from an all-out panic. Then he would be of no use to anyone. "Cavall, you're the only one who can call the regional government for help," she pointed out. "Go somewhere quiet and make that call. Stay on the line until help gets here no matter what." Cavall nodded, looking relieved. Right, I'll do that." He hurried off, and Pamela turned back to the others. "Kevin, you help the volunteers get that fire hydrant open," she directed. "Me?" Kevin smiled, a bit bemused. "What makes you think I know anything about fire hydrants?" "Nothing," Pamela quipped back. "But you're smart and you can figure it out if you don't already know what to do. We need all the roofs on that side of the town wetted down so no flying embers can start a new blaze." Kevin felt Pamela's levels working even on him and smiled. "You got it." Pamela continued to organize the townspeople. A few spry seniors were put in charge of evacuating all the children, elderly, and anyone else who wouldn't be able to move quickly if the fire got out of hand. Another group was organized into making phone calls to all of the nearby ranches and getting more help to come in. A local cafe was set up as a canteen to provide food and rest breaks. Pamela smiled to see Kevin finally get the hydrant working. Volunteers were soon hosing down buildings. She and Kevin jogged to the end of town to check on the progress of the fire break. Pamela was feeling hopeful, but that didn't last past the edge of town. The creek bed was still bone dry. The plows had struggled with the dense dead grass. The fire break was only a few feet wide. Overhead, the sky was dark with smoke, and the air was hot. Ashes fell all around them. As Kevin and Pamela watched, a wall of flames 20 feet high raced toward them, driven by hurricane-force winds. Suddenly, even Kevin wondered if their efforts to stop the fire and save the town would be enough. Pamela's test to be Keeper of the White Tower in the Upper Realm went beyond forging a truce between warring factions in Evita's hometown of Tierra del Fuego. Now she was overseeing the frantic townsfolk as a wildfire bore down on their hamlet and threatened to burn it to the ground. Pamela and Kevin stared at the wall of fire racing towards them, driven by suddenly fierce winds. Overhead, the sky was black from the smoke and the air was as hot and dry as if it came from a furnace. Ashes fell all around them. "It's not enough," Pamela whispered, thinking of all her efforts to organize the townspeople, forcing them to cooperate through Evita's levels. But the fire break wasn't holding back the fast-moving inferno, and the dampened roofs of the town would dry back out in minutes with this heat. Cavall's official calls as mayor to the regional government hadn't brought any help. Pamela had thought she'd convince the selfish Mr. Garcia to release his water stores into the shallow gully circling the town, but the creek bed was still dry. That failure hurt the worse since she had been so sure she had met Mr. Garcia on his terms and persuaded him based on his own priorities. "Don't give up hope yet," Kevin urged. "There must still be something we can do." Pamela shook her head. "If I had weather powers like Majid, I could stop that fire," she pointed out. "Even if I still had my warrior levels, I could work to physically stop the fire. But as great as Evita's powers are, they're useless in a situation like this, Kevin. If only..." But Kevin had stopped listening. He was staring at the creek bed at their feet. A tiny trickle of water was making its way around the dry rocks and dust. "Look," he pointed. "Look at the creek, Pamela." Pamela looked. The trickle became a rivulet and then a stream as the water picked up speed and filled the gully. "He did it?" Pamela blinked in astonishment. "Mr. Garcia actually released his water stores." "He sure did." Kevin laughed as the water overflowed the gully and spread out into the field between the town and the fire. "And look there," Pamela pointed to the sky. A squadron of big-bellied planes flew out of the smoke and circled back over the fire, water bombing the flames. "Caval's calls to the government worked too." As the flames died, so did the wind. The air was suddenly fresher and cooler. "That will help keep the roofs from drying out just in case there are any more sparks," Pamela remarked. Kevin looked up again. "You know, I don't think that's just smoke in the sky. I think those are clouds." As soon as he said it, a gentle rain began to fall. Unlike yesterday's brief storm, this was a soft, gentle rain. It was the kind that soaked into parched land and lasted for days. Kevin and Pamela smiled at each other. The drought is over. In town, everyone was celebrating their close escape from the wildfire. People danced in the rain and children splashed in puddles. Pamela and Kevin spotted Reggio and Mr. Garcia at a pub, toasting each other and looking like the best of friends. Everybody was ecstatic, except Caval. Pamela and Kevin found him alone in the ice cream parlor, surrounded by the town charter and a melting dish of ice cream he was too depressed to eat. "What's the matter?" Pamela asked. "The fire has stopped, and the town is saved. Why do you look like someone peed in your cereal?" Caval frowned. "You sure picked up some weird expressions in America, Evita." Caval still thought Pamela was his sweetheart Evita, back on a visit from her fancy school in America. Maybe." Pamela hoped she wasn't causing permanent damage to Caval and Evita's relationship. They could pick up where they left off if Evita decided to return one day. "But you didn't answer the question," Kevin gently prodded Caval. "What has made you looking so glum?" Caval shook his head. "I really don't think I'm cut out for this mayor thing," he finally admitted. "Today would have been a disaster if you hadn't been here, Evita. Maybe being mayor is too much for a teenager, or at least a teenager like me." "Give yourself credit," Pamela chided him. "It's a big responsibility even for an adult." Kevin frowned, especially the way the mayorship is set up in this town. All the power rests in just one person. "Hey, I didn't ask to be all-powerful," Caval retorted. "I've tried to be really fair about how I use it. It's not like I've been running amok and taking advantage of it. I even let my gym teacher fail me in PE after I missed a bunch of classes because I had to take meetings in the mayor's office. I could have pulled his teaching license, you know." Caval slumped lower. "Instead, I'm the first mayor ever to have to go to summer school." "Nobody's saying power has corrupted you," Kevin assured the teen. "In fact, you've done far better than a lot of people would have." "Definitely," Pamela added, thinking of the time she had misused her extraordinary warrior levels. "But too much power comes with too much responsibility. It's not reasonable to expect you to be a one-boy firefighting committee, much less run every aspect of the town." Kevin finished. "That's why I got out the town charter." Caval raised the document, careful not to get any ice cream on it. "I wanted to see what I needed to do in order to resign." "I get that you're ready to go back to being a regular kid," Pamela said slowly. "But that won't really fix the problem, will it?" Caval frowned. "What do you mean?" Kevin smiled, proud that Pamela had spotted the same problem he had. All that power and responsibility will just fall to someone else, he pointed out. And the next time, the town might not be so lucky to have such incorruptible mayors like you and Evita. Cavall shrugged. What can we do? Someone has to be mayor, don't they? Kevin took the town charter and began to read it. Not necessarily. Later that day, Cavall called a town meeting and announced Kevin's idea. What the heck is a New England town meeting? Mr. Garcia demanded, slightly worse for his afternoon of drinking with Evita's dad. It's a form of direct government where every citizen has an equal vote on all issues. But we already have a vote, someone pointed out. But you only vote on the mayor, Pamela pointed out. After that, the mayor makes all the decisions for good or bad. The mayor makes all the laws. The mayor settles all the disputes. The mayor is in charge of everything. A New England town meeting gives everyone more control over how the town is run, Kevin added. Just like when the ranchers got together and decided how to handle the water rights issues during the drought. Because that worked so well, someone scoffed. Mr. Garcia and Reggio looked ashamed. Yes, sometimes problems will happen, Cavall admitted. But with a New England town system, it wouldn't be just one person trying to solve disputes between citizens. It would be everyone's responsibility. Their fight would have ended a lot faster if all of us could have put pressure on them, one rancher agreed. The town charter allows for a change in government with a unanimous vote, Cavall added. All in favor of changing to a New England, a Tierra del Fuego town meeting form of government, say aye. Aye, roared the town. Opposed? No one opposed it, or if they did, they didn't speak up about it. Mr. Garcia scratched his head. Where does that leave Cavall, though? Isn't he technically still the mayor? That's easy enough to solve, Kevin said. All in favor of dissolving the office of mayor, releasing Cavall from his duties and thanking him for his service, say aye. Aye! Was roared louder than ever. Opposed? Again, no one opposed it. Oh, thank goodness, Cavall cheered, tossing the keys to the city into the air. As Kevin and Pamela laughed, the world around them slowly dissolved into a whirling, spinning kaleidoscope of color and sound. The next thing they knew, Kevin and Pamela were sitting on the floor of the Cave of Echoing Dreams. Beside them was the obsidian mirror Pamela had chosen. Just as with Evita's mirror, Pamela's mirror was now cracked. The surface was dull. Now that its purpose had been served, it no longer reflected anything. Evita and Walter were looking at them with concern. Kevin, Pamela, are you okay? They hurried to help Kevin and Pamela to their feet, but neither of them needed assistance. We're fine, Pamela assured Evita and Walter. There was a new serenity in her voice that Kevin hadn't heard the stoic warrior use before. Walter looked from Pamela to Evita. The tween gaming prodigy had realized it wasn't his fate to become the next keeper after he had nearly gotten his friends killed in a volcano. However, his friends refused to abandon Walter, so he accompanied them as Evita and Pamela continued with the testing. Did you pass your test, Pamela? Pamela slowly nodded. I think I did. Kevin nodded in agreement. And I've come to a decision. She added, sounding so serious everyone immediately gave her their full attention. After a long search, Kevin and the two remaining candidates to be the next keeper of the White Tower of the Upper Realm, Evita, the politician from Tierra del Fuego, and Pamela, the warrior from Sri Lanka, finally located the mysterious arena Alohi had told them to look for. The arena turned out to be the Cave of Echoing Dreams, which Kevin had visited before. Evita passed her next test, having learned to master Pamela's warrior levels. Pamela had to learn to use Evita's levels to create cooperation and organization. Returning to the Cave of Echoing Dreams, Pamela declared that she had an important announcement. Kevin, Evita, and Walter looked at Pamela expectantly. Kevin gave her an encouraging smile. Go ahead, Pamela. Tell us what your decision is. In his private heart, Kevin thought he already knew but wanted to give the teen the opportunity to make her announcement in her own way. Pamela took a deep breath. I've come to an important realization. Becoming the next keeper of the White Tower of the Upper Realm isn't my destiny. Walter's eyes went big. It's not? But I was sure you would rise to become the new gatekeeper. So was I, Evita added. I mean, you were the first candidate Kevin found. You're the leveled warrior and the oldest. Those aren't the most important qualities of the keeper, Kevin smiled. But you're still a wise person to recognize when something isn't your destiny, Pamela. Pamela nodded her appreciation. There was a moment when I was watching the wildfires coming toward Evita's hometown when I lost all hope. Fortunately, help arrived on time, but if it hadn't, I don't know what I would have done. I don't think I could have done anything. I was in too much despair. That's not a luxury the keeper of the White Tower can have. Pamela smiled at Evita. You never gave up hope during your last test, did you? Evita considered. No, I never did. Even when things seemed impossible, I knew I was always going to keep trying no matter what it took. Walter, the preteen gaming prodigy, looked to Kevin. Does that mean Evita is automatically the next keeper since she's the only candidate left? Kevin shook his head. No, this was never a contest to see which candidate would outlast the others. You weren't competing against each other for a prize. You were only testing yourselves to find out if the tower was your true destiny or not. There's still one more test for Evita to pass. But since you and Pamela are through with your testing and your feet have had time to heal, Walter, you and she can go back to the White Tower and wait for us there. Pamela looked around and spotted an exit to the cave. She could see daylight glimmering faintly at the end of it. Come on, Walter. Let's get going so Kevin and Evita can finish what they started. Pamela and Walter wished Evita luck and said goodbye to Kevin before leaving. Kevin smiled as he watched them go. Walter had learned to control his impatience and cockiness. Pamela had developed a nurturing side to her stoic warrior heart. Like all the candidates, they were better for their time in the upper realm. Kevin then turned his attention to Evita. What do I do now, Kevin? Evita asked. But before Kevin could answer, a figure stepped from the shadows. It was his own mentor, the Night King. Kevin expected Evita to draw back from the Night King's sudden appearance, but she only watched him kindly. It was rare for Kevin to be in the Night King's company when another person could see him. He knew this was an important part of Evita's initiation. I am the Night King, guardian of the universe, the Night King intoned to Evita, his voice resonating in the cavernous space. I traverse all realms, watching over those whose destinies intertwine with the cosmic balance. The Night King turned to Kevin. Kevin, you have done your duty as the guardian of the test and done it well. You have kept them all from harm and guided and mentored them as they discovered their destinies. Inside his heart, Kevin smiled. Praise from his mysterious mentor was rare. He felt good about the part he had played and everything he had done. Still, he felt time pressing on them. Although he grows ever weaker, and with it the upper realm's time grows short, he reminded the Night King. Evita must undertake the final test as soon as possible. And so she shall. The Night King turned back to Evita. You, Evita, are special. Your connection with others and your ability to create harmony set you apart. You have mastered new abilities and become a guardian in your own right already. Evita nodded to show she understood. Unlike most of humanity, you were born with levels, the Night King declared. Levels are a measure of your mastery, your proficiency in harmonizing with the energies of the universe. Each level signifies a deeper connection and a greater understanding of the cosmic threats that weave through all things. The more you take in, the more you're able to push out. The more you're connected, the more options you have at your fingertips at all times. Evita smiled. Yes, I've been beginning to understand that, to sense the way everything is connected. My grasp of that concept has been growing ever since I came to the Upper Realm. The Upper Realm knows its own, Kevin interjected. The Night King nodded at Kevin to continue. Kevin went on to explain. Leveled abilities started in ancient Egypt, where individuals sought to unlock the secrets of the universe. Through disciplined practice and attunement to the cosmic energies, they ascended through the levels, becoming conduits of all of the power in the universe. The upper realm is where those who have achieved high levels come to refine their abilities even further. It acts as a balance to the lower realm, which pulls the souls of people down to their basest instincts. Without the upper realm, the foundation in the ordinary realm would soon succumb to those who wished to destroy it. The air within the secluded grotto seemed charged with cosmic energies as the wise leader listened to the revelation of her purpose. Evita, it is thought that you are the chosen one, the next keeper of the upper realm. The Night King spoke, his words laden with the gravity of prophecy. The upper realm requires a keeper, one whose connection with the universe is unparalleled, whose presence ensures that only the worthy may tread upon its sacred grounds. Kevin remembered the last time he heard the Night King speak those same words during a vision quest. Then the Night King had spoken them to a young Elohi. Now the Night King reiterated them to Elohi's successor. At least Kevin hoped Evita was her successor. With no other candidates remaining, Evita was their last hope to save the upper realm. "I am ready," Evita assured the Night King and Kevin. The Night King nodded. "Then it is time for your final test." He motioned to the 1,000 obsidian mirrors lining the walls of the Cave of Echoing Dreams. The obsidian surfaces gleamed in the faint light, creating an otherworldly spectacle. Each mirror would have been identical to the casual observer, but within their dark reflective surfaces lay a subtle nuance that only the Chosen One, the rightful gatekeeper of the upper realm, could discern. "Choose," the Night King commanded. Kevin watched as Evita closed her eyes and breathed deeply. He could tell that she was attuning herself to the cosmic energies. Each reflection bore an identical image of the 16-year-old girl. The choice seemed impossible. Yet, with a clarity that transcended the ordinary, Evita gravitated toward a specific mirror with quiet confidence. Inside that mirror, Evita saw a reflection of herself. It was the same as every other mirror, and yet it was also different. The last time Kevin observed this ritual, all the mirrors seemed the same to him. This time he could sense the cosmic energies whispering to Evita, guiding her hand to the mirror that held her rightful image. The feeling shocked Kevin. Rarely had he felt his own connection to the cosmos so clearly. The last time had been when he had gained his 7th level. Suddenly, Kevin realized that he had spent an inordinate amount of time in the upper realm, possibly more than anyone else ever had. If the upper realm refined a person's levels and helped them on to the next, what did that mean for his own abilities? He shook his head, putting the question out of his mind. As Evita made her choice, the mirrors around her shattered. The shards cascaded to her feet. She ignored them as she stared into the mirror, her eyes going wider. In the cave of shattered mirrors, the cosmic energies embraced Evita, marking her as the rightful keeper of the upper realm. The obsidian shards at her feet echoed the culmination of trials that had tested her mettle and illuminated the path toward cosmic mastery. Just like that, Kevin knew the ritual was complete. Evita was confirmed as the next keeper of the White Tower. He only needed to get Evita back to Elohi before Elohi died, and his great mission, perhaps his greatest mission to date, would be complete. Evita. But she cut him off as she knew exactly what he was going to say. "No, Kevin. We can't go yet." Kevin frowned, feeling the press of time on them. "Why not?" "Because you need to see this." To Kevin's utter shock, Evita handed him the obsidian mirror. After Pamela realized being the next keeper of the White Tower of the Upper Realm was not her destiny, only Evita remained in the running. The Night King appeared to Evita and Kevin in the Cave of Echoing Dreams and oversaw Evita's final test, selecting the correct obsidian mirror from among the thousands in the cave. Evita chose correctly and proved herself to be Elohi's successor. Before Kevin could rush Evita back to the White Tower before Elohi died, Evita insisted Kevin look into her mirror himself. Kevin stared at Evita in shock. The choosing of the obsidian mirror was incredibly personal, and there should have been no reason for Evita to include Kevin in any part of the ritual. "I don't ask this of you lightly," Evita assured Kevin. "I know this is something you need to see." Kevin looked around the Cave of Echoing Dreams for the Night King, but his mysterious mentor had disappeared as usual. It was only Kevin, Evita, and the million shards of shattered mirrors in the cave now. The last time Kevin had looked into an obsidian mirror, he had unleashed his dark doppelganger, Dark Kevin, or DK, as Kevin thought of him in his private thoughts. DK looked just like Kevin and had his levels. What he lacked in Kevin's strict moral code, DK made up for in fashion sense. He shirked Kevin's keds and hoodies for the flashy threads of a menacing hipster. But Kevin knew in his soul Evita was indeed the next keeper of the White Tower. She would not steer him wrong, so he took the mirror. Kevin saw his own face reflected back darkly in the sheen of the obsidian pane. But as he watched, the image of himself began to swirl and be replaced with new visions. His eyes went wide when he saw a city on fire. At first, Kevin couldn't even recognize the city. The destruction was that complete. There didn't even seem to be any efforts to put out the blazes, though the inferno may have been too overwhelming for anyone to fight it. It wasn't until the vision zoomed in and he finally recognized the ruins of the headquarters of Williams & Williams Pharmaceuticals that Kevin realized the blazing city was his own beloved Chicago. Kevin wanted to cry out in denial. This terrible vision could not be true. But the vision went on, scanning over the rubble of Williams & Williams Pharmaceuticals. Kevin saw bodies among the twisted and burning wreckage. Some he recognized as his friends. Some were too disfigured by fire to ever identify. Rage boiled inside Kevin, but the vision went on and he forced himself to focus once more. He saw the vision switch to that of his own suburban home. A few bodies littered the yard. These were the members of the Radiants who guarded Kevin's home. They had not gone down without a fight. There were a few other bodies in black, unfamiliar uniforms that Kevin didn't recognize. Who were these invaders? The images again zoomed in. More invaders in black uniforms were hauling people from the house. Kevin saw his parents, Alan and Susan, in chains, weeping and stumbling as they were herded into a van. His mother-in-law, Dorothy, was hauled out next, hissing and attacking with teeth and claws at anyone who got close to her, until one of the invaders knocked her out with a savage blow to the head. Kevin held his breath. He expected to see his beloved wife Lily carried out next, perhaps still pregnant with their twin babies. There was no way Kevin could tell how far into the future this vision was. Instead, the vision again changed. Instead of destruction and violence, the obsidian mirror now showed him a pleasant green lawn. It rolled in gentle swells to the horizon. The tightness in Kevin's chest eased until he realized the lawn was dotted with large white stones. This wasn't a park or a grassland. This was a graveyard. And finally, there was Lily. Her clothes were torn and singed. Her hair was a mess, and she had cuts and burns on her body. She was weeping as if her heart was broken, but Kevin was just happy to see her alive, at least until he realized what she was kneeling before. It was a large headstone. Kevin felt no surprise to see his own name on it, but he nearly wept to see the two tiny headstones on either side of his. These were the headstones of his and Lily's babies. "No!" Kevin screamed as the vision changed for the final time. Lily was there again. This time she stood in a shadowy conference room at the end of a long table. Like Kevin's parents and Dorothy, Lily was in chains. She was still weeping, but the vision moved on from there, showing Kevin a good view of the smirking faces around the table. Kevin recognized many of them. There were Donald Murphy and Raymond Kessler. Further up the table were the Alliance Director and Harold Dawson. Kevin knew his enemies, some long dead, some living in shadows, had been amassed in this delusion to torment him. As his view approached the head of the table, Dominic Archer was there. Kevin had encountered him most recently in Hollywood at the head of a shady film studio. It was Kevin's first hint as to who was truly behind the destruction he had seen in these visions. Beside Dominic was Kevin's old nemesis, Vincent Reeves. Instead of his usual prosthetic hooks, Vincent had two perfectly articulated hands made out of gleaming silver. A voice boomed out across the conference room. It came from the figure at the head of the table. "Congratulations," the figure boomed in a voice that was oddly familiar to Kevin. "We have seized control of every major city of the face of the planet. Mayor Williams and Chicago were the last holdouts. Now our planetary domination is complete. The world now belongs to the Pinnacle." Kevin gasped in horror as the members of the Pinnacle burst into vicious laughter. The Shadow organization had been long on his radar, but this was a quantum leap forward for the group. Kevin peered closer, his nose nearly touching the obsidian. He was desperate to know who had led this group to destroy everything Kevin loved, but no matter how he tried, Kevin couldn't make out the figure's face. It was somehow wrapped in shadows. The laughter faded as the vision in the obsidian mirror went dark. Kevin found himself back in the cave of echoing dreams. The mirror faded from his nerveless fingers to shatter with the 1,000 others on the ground. Kevin turned troubled eyes on Evita. She must have read everything on his face because she nodded. "My vision was similar to yours, Kevin, though I assumed the mirror showed you how the coming battles will affect your loved ones, the same as it showed me." "We must return to the White Tower now. There is no time to lose," Kevin demanded. Evita nodded and held out a hand. "Take my hand. It's the fastest way back." "What do you mean?" Kevin demanded, frantic to be off. "My powers are greatly expanded now that I have been confirmed as the next keeper. I can take us directly to Elohi." A small frown crossed Evita's face. "At least, I'm pretty sure I can." "Then I know you can," Kevin assured his protege. He took her hand. Evita closed her eyes. Kevin was surrounded by a flash of white light. He let himself get dragged through space and time. When he opened his eyes, he and Evita were standing on the lawn before the White Tower. The 6 former candidates, Pamela, Walter, Angel, Majid, Pembroke, and Nestor, were gathered there along with both the Yetis. "Kevin, Evita, you're back!" they cried. Nestor, whose levels were connected to his abilities as a psychic, looked at Evita. "You passed your test, didn't you? You're the next keeper." Evita nodded shyly and the others congratulated her. But Kevin's attention was glued to the White Tower, or rather the tower that had been white. As Elohi entered the final stages of her life, black rot began to creep up the tower, reflecting how Elohi's own body was slowly dying by inches. The blackness had almost reached the top of the tower. They were almost out of time. Without a word, he grabbed Evita's hand and they raced up the tower stairs to Elohi's tiny room at the top. Here, too, the blackness had overcome the shining white marble of the tower. The room was like a cave with only a tiny patch of white in the very center of the ceiling. Elohi lay so still on her simple bed that Kevin was almost sure she was dead. All color was gone from her face and the keeper's lips were white. Evita immediately went to her and knelt by her side. "I am here, Keeper of the White Tower. I have passed my tests, and I have been found worthy." "Good." The words slipped from Elohi's mouth like wind over dead leaves. "Come close, so I may pass on the keeping of the White Tower." Evita bent her face to Elohi's lips, and the keeper kissed the girl gently on the forehead. Elohi slipped a small brass key, the emblem of the keeper of the tower, into Evita's hand. It was the last action Elohi would ever take. At the same moment, she died. But as Kevin watched, the blackness receded from the white marble of the tower. It faded away until the tower's brilliant whiteness was restored to its shining self. All around Kevin, he felt the upper realm take a breath and somehow settle fully back into its proper axis. A sense of rightness and wholeness flooded everything as the upper realm finally was put fully to rights since the first time Gwen Archer had trespassed as an interloper on this sacred plane. Evita was confirmed as the next keeper of the White Tower of the Upper Realm just in time for Elohi to pass on the role to the 16-year-old from Tierra del Fuego. The Upper Realm was saved, but Kevin had received a new vision of the coming horrors that the Pinnacle posed to the world. He was anxious to get back to the ordinary realm and begin investigating, but the Upper Realm wasn't finished with Kevin Williams yet. Kevin learned from the Yetis that Elohi had left instructions for her funeral. He and the kids worked together to create the ritual farewell the former keeper had ordained for herself. Angel used her levels and powers to forge a Hawaiian canoe into existence for the ceremony, while the Yetis created leis for each of them to wear. Pamela carried Elohi's body in her strong arms to the canoe, with Pembroke offering his emotional support as tears poured down the stoic warrior's face. Walter carefully cobbled together a stack of kindling at the head of the canoe as if it were a Tetris puzzle to be solved, and Nestor informed them of the most favorable place to launch the boat. Majid used his weather workings to urge the tide to take the canoe out in the Sea of Possibility. Each of the candidates' unique skills was a part of Elohi's funeral, and for all, it was another bit of closure after their ordeal in the Upper Realm. They all stood on the beach as they watched the canoe drift further out into the water. When it was far enough offshore, Kevin addressed them. 400 years ago, Elohi was a young woman, not much older than some of you. She had already spent her life building her natural abilities until she was ready to come here and become the keeper of the White Tower. Although her time as keeper ended too soon, we celebrate her accomplishments and thank her for everything she did to keep the Upper Realm safe and aid others as they work to refine their own levels to the highest degree. Kevin looked wistfully at the lapping waters as he continued. In Hawaiian, the term for grief is kaumaha, a heavy weight expected to be lifted. Elohi would not want us to grieve for her indefinitely, but I know we will be inspired by her example forever. The Yetis gave loud, sniffling assents of agreement. They had known Elohi the longest. They had lost not just a keeper, but an old and much-loved friend. With his brief eulogy concluded, Kevin nodded to Evita. Evita called down the powers of the Upper Realm. A single bolt of lightning, as graceful as a dancer, struck Walter's carefully arranged kindling. The lighting lit the canoe into a blazing funeral pyre just as Elohi had wished. In silence, they watched as the canoe and Elohi's body were consumed and sank below the waters of the Sea of Possibility. As Kevin glanced back at the headland, he saw that they had been joined by one more mourner. The Night King stood on a high bluff overlooking the sea while watching everything. After the ceremony, Kevin left the Yetis and the kids to help Evita settle into her new home in the White Tower and went to meet the Night King. The two convened on the bluff and stared out at the sea for a long moment. Then Kevin told the Night King what Evita had shown him in her obsidian mirror. Kevin spoke of the destruction of Chicago and his home and family. He told the Night King of all of his enemies gathered around the long conference table. Finally, he spoke of the mysterious leader and the Pinnacle's world domination. I'm pretty sure Evita saw something similar from what she told me, Kevin finished. Sometimes sharing his concerns with his mentor made Kevin feel better. This time it only increased his dread. The Night King was silent for a long time. Finally he spoke. You are correct about what Evita saw. Anyone who had looked into the mirror after her would see how the coming of the Pinnacle would affect their life and loved ones. For almost everybody, it would be destruction and terror. As you can see, there is not a corner of your world that would not be the worse for the coming of the Pinnacle. I must stop them, Kevin declared. I'll do anything I can to make sure my vision doesn't come to pass. The Night King looked at Kevin seriously. There is only one thing that might, and I only say might, enable you to defeat the Pinnacle before their hold on the world becomes absolute and indestructible. But it is incredibly dangerous. Only a few have ever managed such a feat, but after all the time you've spent in the Upper Realm, it might just be possible. Realization dawned on Kevin. I need to gain my next level, don't I? I need to go from being a level 7 to being a level 8. Kevin thought back to when he had achieved his level 7. The cosmic force of his leveling had nearly been enough to flatten the city of Washington, D.C. What kind of power would going from 7 to 8 unleash on the upper realm? But Kevin had no choice if that's what it took to defeat the Pinnacle and save the Foundation and his beloved wife Lily and their babies. The Night King shook his head. You do not need to go from being a level 7 to being a level 8, Kevin. You need to go from being a level 7 straight to being a level 9. Kevin's mind was still reeling when he returned to the White Tower. The kids were chattering with each other as the Yetis looked on indulgently. What's all the excitement? Kevin asked as he approached. He tried to make his voice sound normal and mostly succeeded. We're talking about what we, that is I and the other kids, are going to do when we get back to the ordinary realm, Pembroke announced excitedly. Are you going back to your families? Kevin asked. He knew that some of the kids, like Pamela, Walter, and Pembroke, had loving if misguided parents. But others like Angel and Nestor had terrible family lives before coming to the upper realm. Majid was an orphan, though his community had happily taken him in. I'm going back to see my mom and dad, Pamela said, but just to visit. After that, I'd like to come work for you, Kevin. Pamela was 17, almost 18, and Kevin was sure the Radiance would be thrilled to have such a skilled fighter among its ranks. Majid was almost as old as Pamela. I want to use my weather working to help vulnerable populations, like I did with my community in the Maldives, he told Kevin. I have some connections in the government, Kevin mused, thinking of Stanley Cooper of the Reaper Squad. I'm sure we could find you a place with FEMA where you could help with natural disasters. Majid grinned. That left only the 4 younger kids, Nestor, Angel, Walter, and Pembroke. None of them was nearly old enough to be fully independent. Pembroke spoke up, his empathetic abilities making him the obvious leader. When you first approached us, you said you were recruiting for your school in Washington, the Williams School. Remember, Kevin? I do remember, Kevin smiled. It seems so long ago now. We'd like to take you up on the offer if it's still good. Nestor, Angel, and Walter nodded along to Pembroke's words. I'd be thrilled to offer you all full scholarships, Kevin assured them. I made arrangements with Katja Rafferty, the headmistress, that if any of you wanted to go there after you return from the upper realm, you only need to present yourselves at her office and everything will be taken care of. The 4 younger kids smiled, obviously relieved to have their future settled. Evita had been standing a little apart and smiling. This is goodbye then, she told them. A person can only come to the upper realm once. She shot a look at Kevin. Except under exceptional circumstances. Walter frowned. But won't you be lonely here all by yourself? The Yetis grumbled. What are we, chopped liver? The female muttered. Sorry, Walter quickly corrected. I mean without any other people, human people here. I won't be the only human here for long, Evita assured him. The upper realm has been closed for far too long. Many need to come here to continue to refine their levels. Walter scratched his head. So you've got something like a backlog for visitors? Something like that. But first, I need to send you all on your way. Normally, a person returned to the same place he or she had been in the ordinary realm when they returned from the upper realm. In the cases of some of the kids, that wasn't possible, or at least advisable. Fortunately, as keeper, Evita could return them wherever they liked. Pamela went first, saying her goodbyes and giving Walter's hair an extra ruffle. They'd become close during the final round of testing. Then she sat down across from Evita. Evita touched her forehead. Pamela's eyes slid closed. She fell gently backward and disappeared before her body hit the grass. Majid went next. Then Nestor, Angel, Walter, and Pembroke went as a group. Evita sent them off. Kevin knew they'd appear in Katja's office exactly as they had discussed. Katja and the school would take good care of the kids. Kevin had no worries on that account. Evita turned her smile on Kevin. Kevin, you are now released from your duties as guardian of the test, the upper realm, and I. Thank you for all that you have done." "It was my honor and my privilege," Kevin replied with a little bow. "But I'm afraid I can't go home myself just yet." The upper realm was saved, but Kevin had received a new vision of the coming horrors that the pinnacle posed to the world. He was anxious to get back to the ordinary realm and begin investigating, but the upper realm wasn't finished with Kevin Williams yet. The Night King revealed that in order to defeat the pinnacle, Kevin would need to not just achieve level 8, he would have to make the quantum leap to 9. Kevin related to Evita, the new keeper of the White Tower of the Upper Realm, that the Night King believed that Kevin needed to make the quantum leap forward and achieve his level 9. Evita was imbued with new wisdom and grace since the 16-year-old from Tierra del Fuego had taken over from Elohi. She nodded gravely when Kevin finished. "Going from a level 7 to a level 9 would be an extraordinary accomplishment," she agreed. "Perhaps unprecedented, or at least incredibly rare. But this is the Upper Realm. This is the place where experts come to refine their levels and gain new heights of power. And you have spent more time in the Upper Realm than anyone other than its gatekeepers. Tell me how I can support you and I will do all that is in my power." Kevin considered her offer. "When I achieved my level 7, I did it with the aid of an extremely powerful Tier 9 medicinal pill," Kevin told her. "I no longer have the ingredients to make that kind of pill again. They were one of a kind, but without that kind of herbal aid, I'm not sure how I can make such a huge leap forward. Perhaps you know of other herbal components that exist only here in the Upper Realm that can aid me." "There are no more external aids at this point," a voice spoke from behind Kevin. He and Evita turned to see that the Night King had joined them without either of them being aware. His stealth, Kevin realized, knew no bounds. He could move without warning in any plane of existence. Evita nodded respectfully. "Welcome back, Night King." "I greet you, Keeper of the White Tower," he replied. "What do you mean there are no more external aids?" Kevin demanded. "How am I to achieve level 9 then?" "If you are ready to ascend to level 9, then you will be able to do so using only the force of your mind." The Night King paused. "But I must warn you, most of the others who have attempted to make a leap of more than one level at once did not survive." "I remember you warned me of threats to my sanity before." Kevin still felt icy shivers go down his spine when he remembered the Night King's dire and graphic warnings as he achieved skills over the Blue Storm technique in the 10 directions. "This time it isn't your sanity at risk, Kevin. This time it is your very life, and you will have to put yourself on the line. The strain of such a huge leap forward could stop your heart." Evita nodded solemnly. "It could kill you outright, Kevin." Kevin looked to the Night King. "But you believe achieving my level 9 is the only way I can stop the pinnacle from taking over the world?" "I don't just believe it. It is a certainty." The Night King raised his chin. "The powers and abilities you will gain will be invaluable in your fight against the pinnacle. Communicating with the dead, speaking with plants as you now do with animals, and most of all, telekinesis." Kevin thought back and realized he had been slowly developing those abilities since he had returned from defeating Quentin Covington. He related this information to the Night King and Evita. He had spoken to the dead in Egypt. He had made a cup slide across the table using only his mind. He had communicated with a giant Venus flytrap plant. When Kevin finished, the Night King nodded. "These are only hints of your coming abilities as you have been refining your way up through your level 7. But to gain true mastery, you will need to achieve level 9. "Then I will do it," Kevin said simply. Failure was not an option, not with the world and especially his darling wife Lily and their babies on the line. The Night King gave Kevin instructions on how to enter the correct mental state to begin the attempt. Kevin seated himself on the grass. The Night King and Evita stood over him, guarding him and lending him their support as he made the attempt that would either end in Kevin's quantum leap to level 9 or would stop his heart and kill him. Kevin closed his eyes and began the mental process as the Night King had instructed. He felt himself dropping deeper and deeper into the state. His awareness of everything else faded away as the mental state he needed grew. As usual, it was a lovely sunny day in the Edenic upper realm, but right at that moment, a change occurred in the sky overhead. It began to gray, darken. This wasn't due to any kind of cloud cover. Instead, it was as if the light and color in the heavens were draining away. Colors also faded from the grass Kevin was sitting on and the rest of his surroundings. Only Kevin remained as vivid and bright as ever, as if he was glowing from the inside. The grayness overhead thickened and began to swirl. It became a vortex growing until it took up the entire sky, spinning unceasingly. A bolt of lightning that was thicker than a tree trunk descended from the sky. The lightning hit the ground less than 100 feet from where Kevin sat, but he didn't even flinch. Neither did the Night King nor Evita show any fright or terror at nature's wrath. "This is a sign he has achieved the correct state of mind," the Night King announced. Below the headland, the Sea of Possibility began to roil. Great waves battered the cliffs as gale-force winds whipped around the trio. Evita looked up. The vortex in the sky kept spinning. More and more lightning flashed across its breath, gathering energy to give to Kevin as he made his attempt to reach level 9. Evita knew that the higher one's power base, the stronger the lightning would be. Kevin continued to sit cross-legged on the ground. His body had become numb and felt far away due to the influence of the mental state he was reaching for. But inside, he was trembling uncontrollably. Just as when he had made the great leap to reach level 7, he could only feel the spiritual energy in his body building, and a surge of raw power that he had never felt before was constantly increasing. Suddenly, lightning hit the earth all around the three of them. A crack appeared in the ground. Trees trembled and crashed in the woods. The wind roared louder. A pitch-black light instantly enveloped Kevin. "He has reached his level 8, the Night King roared over the noise. The wind was so strong that he and Evita could barely stand, but Kevin remained as still as a stone, reaching deeper within himself while also reaching outward. At that moment, a burst of lightning fell from the sky. The loud sound it produced seemed to be able to split the entire world apart. The vibration caused the ground to tremble. The lightning struck Kevin directly. 2 more bolts followed in quick succession, each causing the ground around him to crack and shatter further. The Night King and Evita swayed, trying to keep their feet under themselves. The blank sky overhead seemed to shatter as if it was actually breaking apart. "Can Kevin do it?" Evita yelled to the Night King. "Can Kevin reach level 9? "It is still possible," the Night King called back. "But he may tear the upper realm apart to do it." Evita no longer felt the serenity she had gained when she became the keeper of the White Tower. She was supposed to be the protector and overseer of the upper realm, but now it was in danger of being destroyed. "If he must do so, then he must," was the Night King's only reply. The mountain at the center of the upper realm began to crumble, sending rains of boulders the size of buildings onto the lower areas. The Sea of Possibility splintered into shards that flickered in and out of existence. 3 more bolts of lightning hit Kevin directly. The world around Kevin broke apart. The land, the sky, the sea, the Night King, Evita, and even the very air shattered into component atoms and molecules as more power raced into Kevin's body, filling it to a greater degree than it could possibly hold. 2 bolts of lightning, each bigger and brighter than any before, struck Kevin's body from out of nowhere. Inside, Kevin felt like he was disintegrating, being torn apart at his molecular bonds by the power flooding into him. He tried to channel it. He tried to control it. He tried to do anything at all in order not to be destroyed by it. But it was so much. A final bolt of lightning hit Kevin Williams and stayed, a bridge connecting heaven and earth and everything else. It wrapped around Kevin's entire body, consuming him entirely. Evita was confirmed as the next keeper of the White Tower of the Upper Realm just in time for Elohi to pass on the role to the 16-year-old from Tierra del Fuego. The Upper Realm was saved, but Kevin had received a new vision of the coming horrors that the Pinnacle posed to the world. He was anxious to get back to the ordinary realm and begin investigating, but the Upper Realm wasn't finished with Kevin Williams yet. The Night King revealed that in order to defeat the looming threat of the Pinnacle, Kevin would need to not just achieve level 8, he would have to make the quantum leap to 9. But the Night King warned the attempt could stop Kevin's heart and kill him. With the Night King's and Evita's support, Kevin entered the mental state to reach level 9. But as he began to approach level 9, the Upper Realm was torn apart at the molecular level. It became too much, and Kevin's heart stopped. Silence. That was the only thing that Kevin Williams was aware of. He wasn't aware of the Upper Realm that he had just destroyed. He wasn't able to think that the chase of the leveling up ritual had surely brought about the end of the lives of his protege, Evita, and of his mentor, the Night King. He couldn't even think of his beloved wife, Lily, and their unborn babies. All that Kevin Williams was aware of was silence, and that his heart, which had pumped away for over 1 billion beats over his lifetime, had finally stopped. There was nothing he could do about it. He couldn't reach inside his own chest with his hand and start his heart pumping again. But a whisper of something brushed across the surface of his mind. The whisper was familiar. It sounded like his beloved Lily. "Come back to me, Kevin." The sweet voice wafted and swept into his brain. Suddenly it occurred to Kevin. He couldn't reach inside his own chest with his hand to restart his heart, but he could do it if he used his mind. Once before, Kevin had slid a cup a short distance over a table with his mind. It had been a jerky, spastic attempt, crude and clumsy, but he had to try. Kevin reached out with his mind and tried to move his heart. It was like trying to flex a muscle he didn't know he had. But as soon as he did, he could feel that power. All the power he had absorbed from the lightning strikes was available to him. Massive amounts of power. Unbelievable amounts of power. His heart gave a funny little twitch. Not a beat, but it was a start. Kevin tried again, feeling his way with the power of his mind, keeping at it, finding a rhythm that was as natural as breathing. His mind worked to keep his heart going when it couldn't keep going on its own. And then his heart was going on its own. It was pumping again all by itself. As soon as his heart was back to normal, Kevin became aware that the Upper Realm had shattered all around him and that it was now nothing more than molecules in the void. Can't have that, Kevin thought to himself. Not when we just worked so hard to save the Upper Realm. With an ease that seemed natural but would astonish him later, Kevin reached out with his mind again, engaging his telekinetic powers to gather up the atomic particles and push them back into their proper place. Only then did he take a deep breath and open his eyes. The Upper Realm was just as he had left it, another brilliant sunny day in an Edenic landscape. The land, the sky, the sea, the air were all perfect and mirrored the utopia that he had left just before his leveling up ordeal. Standing to either side of him were Evita and the Night King. Evita looked rather green, but she gave Kevin a watery smile. Even the Night King's beard looked slightly ruffled, and that was the most disheveled Kevin had ever seen him. But the Night King's voice was steady as he spoke. "Congratulations, Kevin. You have done what almost no one before you has. You have made the great quantum leap from level 7 to level 9. Kevin rose to his feet, feeling new power coursing through his body. He relished the power. All around him he could hear the whispers of the plants and grass and growing things. He gave a pebble a little nudge with his mind. He was delighted when it rolled over like an obedient dog. The Night King saw and smiled indulgently. "Enjoy it while it lasts, Kevin. Once you return to the ordinary realm, you will have to learn to use your powers all over again. You'll also have to keep refining them to be able to use them to their potential." Kevin nodded. He remembered how levels could be limited and unpredictable when they were first achieved. He would have to practice and train hard in order to make the most of them. With the threat of the Pinnacle hanging over his head, Kevin was sure that finding motivation would not be an issue. "Thank you for helping guide me to reach level 9, Kevin told his mentor. I take the privilege and the responsibility seriously. I will do everything I can to stop the Pinnacle. The Night King nodded. You have never failed to do your very best, Kevin. But the Pinnacle will be your greatest battle ever. You will have to confront and overcome the worst enemy a person can ever have. Kevin frowned. He felt like the Night King was being unnecessarily cryptic yet again. He crossed his arms and looked again. I was hoping that now that I'm a level 9, you might just tell me what you know straight out rather than give me hints and puzzles. If defeating the Pinnacle is really so important, not just to me but the entire Foundation, well, would that be so hard? But when Kevin looked back, the Night King had disappeared. I hate it when he does that, Kevin grumbled. I know how you feel, Evita muttered as she furrowed an eyebrow at Kevin. Kevin blinked at her. As guardian of the test, he mentored Evita and the other candidates through their trials. But I never disappeared on you, Kevin protested. That's not even something I can do. But you were often more mysterious and cryptic in your advice than we would have liked. How can you complain when me being mysterious and cryptic helped you become the Keeper of the White Tower? Kevin countered. Evita smiled. I can't complain at all. Without you, I never would have found my destiny. Thank you, Kevin. I'm only sorry this will be the last time we will meet. Kevin nodded. A person is only supposed to come to the Upper Realm once. And since your time as the guardian of the test is over, you can no longer come and go as you like, Evita added. Besides, you have done what you set out to do, Kevin. You have achieved a great leap forward in your levels. The Upper Realm has nothing more to offer you. Kevin looked around. The Upper Realm was beautiful, and he knew other experts would soon find their own special ways there to refine and achieve their own levels. Evita would not be alone for long. There was also the reunited Yeti couple to keep her company. I know you're going to be a wonderful keeper of the Upper Realm, he told her. Thank you, Kevin. The hopes and blessings of the Upper Realm go with you as you return to face your great enemy. Goodbye. Goodbye, Evita. Kevin bent his head and Evita kissed him on the forehead. Kevin felt himself falling backward, but before his body hit the grass, he disappeared. Kevin opened his eyes and blinked. He was home again, right where he had been when he had last journeyed to the Upper Realm to finally oversee the testing of the candidates and see which of them would be the next keeper of the White Tower. He checked his watch. Although it felt like he had been gone eons, his watch told him he had returned to the ordinary world only moments after he had left it. It was such a distortion of his personal sense of time, it almost made him dizzy. The memory of his visions of the Pinnacle and the destruction of the world and his family came flooding back to him. He jumped to his feet. He needed to see his team and get them to work right away. Although Kevin had heard rumors of the Pinnacle for a while, the organization was so clandestine that Kevin only had the vaguest idea of who might be involved. That needed to end immediately. Kevin had to know who was a member of the Pinnacle, what their plans were, and most importantly, who was their leader. That shadowy figure even the vision in the obsidian mirror couldn't show Kevin clearly. Yes, the identity of the Pinnacle's leader was what Kevin needed to know most of all. Evita was confirmed as the next keeper of the White Tower of the Upper Realm just in time for Alohi to pass on the role to the 16-year-old from Tierra del Fuego. The Upper Realm was saved, but Kevin had received a new vision of the coming horrors that the Pinnacle posed to the world. He risked his life to make a quantum leap from level 7 all the way to level 9 before returning to the ordinary realm. Now his first priority was to get his friends and associates involved in finding out as much as possible about the Pinnacle, especially the organization's shadowy leader. Kevin ran down the stairs but was distracted when he heard the voice of his beloved Lily. Clear my schedule as much as possible for the next few months. With the World's Fair coming back to Chicago, it will take up much of my time as mayor, Lily was saying. Kevin made a quick diversion into Lily's office. She gave him one of her beautiful smiles when she saw him. Hi, Kevin. How are... Kevin cut her off with a kiss and embrace that, despite its enthusiasm, was careful with her rounded belly. Despite carrying twin babies, Lily had suffered little discomfort during her pregnancy. In fact, she had even developed some very startling abilities of her own. Even now in the final weeks of her pregnancy, and though she was carrying not one but two babies, She was still agile and active. Pregnancy had done anything but sideline or slow Lily down and had, in fact, done the opposite. It had turned her into a force of nature. "It's so good to see you," Kevin whispered into her hair. He had seen a vision of Lily weeping and in tatters. To see her for real now, looking so healthy and well, made his heart swell with happiness. Lily giggled. "Kevin, you just saw me less than an hour ago." She hugged him back. "But I'm always happy to see you too." Although from Kevin's point of view, he had been gone for a long time as he oversaw the testing of the candidates in the upper realm. Almost no time had passed in the ordinary realm, and he did realize that in that time structure he and Lily had crossed paths in what was for Lily just a few moments before. Lily took a closer look at Kevin. "I don't know why, but suddenly you seem different, Kevin. As funny as it sounds, you seem more powerful. But I don't know what could have created such a big change in you in only the short time since I last saw you." Kevin knew Lily was gaining a greater understanding of levels and power of her own since she began carrying his babies. But he didn't have time to explain everything now. "I have to run out now," he told her. "I have to get a very important project started, but when I get back, I want to have dinner with you. In fact, I want to spend the whole evening together. Can we do that?" "Of course, Kevin, if that's what you want." "It is." He gave her another kiss before continuing to head out the door. He passed his mother-in-law Dorothy just as he was exiting out the front door. "Kevin!" she called in a shrill voice as she grabbed his arm. "We need to discuss the changes for the twins' nursery. I think the big bedroom in the top of the stairs would be perfect." "That's the primary bedroom," Kevin pointed out. "The mayor has always slept in that room since this mansion was built for the city's leader." "Exactly. Lily will still be sleeping there, but you won't be. There'll be just enough room in there for Lily and both the babies. It's very important for a new mother to be as close as possible to her babies. Of course, that means there won't be room for you and all of your hideous clothes." Dorothy eyed Kevin's keds and dockers with disgust. "But there's a little room in the attic where we can put you, don't worry. It will just be for the first 15 or 20 years. Kevin rolled his eyes at Dorothy. She was actually trying to kick him out of his own bedroom and get him further away from Lily, his beloved wife for whom he'd done everything, though his mother-in-law still couldn't see the extent of his devotion. "But first you have to come shopping with me. The nursery will need a lot of new things, and I need someone to carry my bags." Dorothy continued on in what was nearly a monologue. Kevin opened his mouth to protest, but she cut him off. "Don't argue with me, Kevin. You know I'm always right." Kevin wrenched his free arm. "Sorry, Dorothy. This time you'll have to be left instead of right. Left behind, that is. I have something more important I have to do right now." Kevin had called ahead, so by the time he reached the headquarters of Williams & Williams Pharmaceuticals in downtown Chicago, everyone he had called was already assembled in the big conference room. Dalton Steele, Sasha, Olivia Rafferty, Kyle Thompson, and Marcus Watford were waiting for him, along with his lab techs Zara, Yuki, and Hiro. As soon as Kevin entered, Dalton spoke up.
"Okay, Kevin. You called us all here and said it was important. What could possibly be?"
Dalton froze, cutting himself off. The others in the room, some with levels of their own, looked at Kevin, suddenly startled. "What am I sensing here?" Sasha asked, looking confused. "Kevin, if I didn't know better, I'd think you were suddenly like a level 9 or something." He laughed, but no one else did. "I'm sensing the same thing," Olivia said quietly. The others nodded. "But he was a level 7 the last time we saw him," Kyle protested. "You can't just go jumping through levels like that, can you?"
"Kevin can," Dalton said with assurance. "He must have, since we're all feeling the same thing."
"You're right," Kevin told them. Then he went on to explain everything that had happened in the upper realm, from his search for the candidates to be the next keeper of the White Tower, to the testing, to his vision of the pinnacle in the Obsidian Mirror, to finally achieving level 9 after quickly absorbing and leaping over the elements of level 8 acquisition.
"That was a big risk,"
Marcus said, shaking his head.
You could have died trying to get to level 9 like that.
I had to do it, asserted. It's the only way I can stop the Pinnacle before they take over the world and before Chicago and my family are destroyed.
So what does level 9 get you?
Kyle leaned forward, all eagerness. For one thing, this. Kevin walked over to the potted plant sitting on the windowsill. He reached out to it with his mind and opened a line of communication. It wasn't like talking to another person. It wasn't even like the communication he could establish with animals. It was a language all its own. Kevin's levels were so new they weren't fully formed yet. It would take time and practice for him to learn to master them, but after a few tries he established a rapport with the plant. He gave the plant a simple command to grow. Suddenly the plant sprouted in every direction until it was twice the size it had been just a moment ago. "Wow!" Hiro and Yuki said in unison. "There's more to it than that," Kevin warned them. "Right now we need to focus on finding out everything we can about the Pinnacle and their plans." The group pooled their knowledge of the shadowy organization, but it didn't add up to much. Nobody had any clues as to who the mysterious leader could be. "Didn't you see the leader in that vision you had?" Zara prompted Kevin. "Can't you tell us anything about him?" "I didn't see him clearly," Kevin said after thinking it over. "He was just a shadow. I couldn't identify him by his voice or his form, but there was something familiar about him." "So you may have encountered him before," Olivia pointed out. "He could be an old enemy of yours."
"That doesn't really narrow it down," Marcus pointed out. "No offense, Kevin, but you've made a lot of enemies."
It was true. Kevin had made enemies with a wide range of people, from members of the Herbalist Society to several powerful billionaires across the planet to his own family members.
"Maybe it was that evil criminal, Vincent Reeves," Dalton offered. "You said he was fighting you up every step of the way when you were trying to find those kids for the Upper Realm."
Kevin considered and shook his head. "I know the leader isn't Vincent because I saw Vincent at the Pinnacle table clearly. I also saw Dominic Archer, Harold Smart, Raymond Kessler, and others. Those I saw in my vision surely can't be the Pinnacle's leader. The information being sent to me through the Obsidian Mirror might not be fully detailed, but it also wouldn't betray me or lead me down the wrong path. That I know for certain. But all those people are a place to start our intelligence gathering," Kevin pointed out. "They must all be connected with the Pinnacle in some way." "That's a brilliant idea," Olivia agreed. "Zara, you start hacking into every system you can. Start looking for links between these 4 people. That might help us trace some of the threads back to the larger Pinnacle organization." "I'm on it." Zara opened her laptop and got to work immediately. Kevin divided the other known Pinnacle associates between the rest of his team. They would begin with live surveillance and report anything of significance directly to Kevin. "Not all of those people are Chicago natives," Kevin pointed out, "but my vision focused on Chicago and its destruction specifically. Pay attention to anything that any of these people have to do with Chicago. Real estate interests, government contracts here, even just an interest in our sports teams."
"That might not be very useful," Dalton pointed out. "With the World's Fair coming to Chicago this year, half the planet will have some kind of connection to the city."
Kevin knew that Lily had had to devote a great deal of her mayoral energies to overseeing the World's Fair that was soon to open in Chicago. Her predecessor, Mayor Christopher Walsh, had seeded it with corruption that filled his pockets and those of his mobster allies. Thankfully, Lily had, with a good dose of help from Kevin himself, been able to ready the city, prepare venues for exhibits, and save the city from the humiliation of opening a non-existent global expo that could have caused them all a great deal of humiliation. Now Kevin realized that the World's Fair might be a backdrop to the Pinnacle's planned invasion of the Foundation. Ruining Lily's triumph and using it as a way to topple the Foundation was surely a plot that the Pinnacle, who had long seen Kevin as their ultimate enemy, would relish. "Report it anyway," Kevin commanded. A big event with so many people like that could be just the kind of thing the Pinnacle might try to use as their own advantage. The team agreed to start immediately. "Good. I have to make a quick trip to Nashville, but I'll be back before evening. Let me know whatever you find." "Nashville? Why Nashville, Kevin?" Kyle asked. Kevin sighed. Because I have to let Brett Stewart of the Myriads tell me, I told you so. He's been warning me about the Pinnacle for a while. Seems like he was right. Kevin set his mouth into a grim line as he hurried out of the room. Kevin returned to the mayor's mansion and to Lily's arms after he successfully saved the upper realm from destruction and oversaw the competition that had Evita, the teenager from Tierra del Fuego, installed as the new gatekeeper of the White Tower. Though he was thrilled to be back with Lily, he also knew from his horrifying vision that the Pinnacle was readying their invasion of the Foundation, and he could not rest before planning to fend off their latest attempt at domination. After sending out many of his most trusted underlings to try and find information about who the leader of the Pinnacle might be and about the looming threat, Kevin had himself gone to the Myriads headquarters outside of Nashville to alert his longtime friend and ally that Brett's preparation for the Pinnacle's attack was not in vain. It was coming. Kevin knew, and Brett the Myriads, Radiance, Stanley Cooper of the Reaper Squad, and all of the local acolytes who had sworn their allegiance to Kevin and his Grail to save the Foundation would have to be ready. But for the moment, Kevin would have to wait. Waiting was not something that Kevin did well, though he also knew that this brief respite was a good time for him to be the loving and dutiful husband that he could be. In between his responsibilities at Williams & Williams Pharmaceuticals, and as the self-appointed savior of the ordinary plane of existence, Kevin returned to the mayor's mansion looking forward to at least a few days of rest and many hours in Lily's company as both awaited the birth of their twins. Kevin and Lily were, for once, able to have a quiet, casual breakfast at home. But just as they were going 4 seconds on Kevin's expertly made brioche French toast, which would find itself at home at any Michelin star restaurant, Lily got a call on her cell. Kevin certainly couldn't begrudge Lily's attention being diverted by her job, what with his globe-trotting activities, and all of his time in the upper realm, though those adventures happened in a split second of time in the ordinary realm. But he assumed that this call would be another minor detail about the World's Fair's preparations that Lily could handle in a few words while only taking a handful of seconds away from their quality time together. After she answered, Kevin watched her face begin to fall. "That's really disappointing to hear," she said. She listened for another moment and then replied, "Thanks for letting me know. Keep me posted if there are any updates." "What's wrong?" Kevin asked after Lily had hung up. "The Red Stars have all mysteriously fallen ill," Lily explained. "If they aren't able to make a drastic turnaround in the next few days, they'll have to forfeit the match." Kevin was just as disappointed as Lily upon hearing this news. The Chicago Red Stars were the city's women's professional soccer team, and their first playoff match was just a few days away. As mayor of Chicago, Lily had been asked to announce the starting lineup, and she and Kevin had been really looking forward to the game. "They're the favorites to win the league championship this year," Lily said. "That would be devastating if their season ended because of this." "What are they all sick with?" Kevin asked. "No one knows," Lily replied. "None of the team doctors recognize the illness, but with how quickly it spread among the players, they're all being kept in quarantine as a precaution." "I'll stop by the team facilities and see if there's anything I can do," Kevin suggested as he carried his plate to the sink. "Save a slice of French toast for me?" Lily eyed the delectable stack in front of her. "I can't make any promises," she admitted. Kevin drove to the Red Stars team facility next to their stadium and walked through the main entrance. To the receptionist at the front desk, he said, "I heard about the team getting sick. I thought I might be able to help." The receptionist eyed him skeptically and said, "Yeah, that's nice of you and all, but we don't let just anyone have access to the players. We have a highly trained medical staff here." At that moment, the head coach of the team, Regina Powell, walked by the desk. "Kevin Williams," she said in surprise. She turned to the receptionist with more than a bit of annoyance etched on her face. "Do you not know Kevin Williams, founder of Williams Pharmaceuticals, husband of our upcoming guest of honor, Lily Williams, the mayor of our fair city?" The receptionist stammered in embarrassment, Being reprimanded by the head coach was basically the worst nightmare anyone could endure if she wanted to be kept on the team's payroll. Coach Powell approached Kevin and shook his hand. "I'm sure you've heard the news about the game. We're really hoping the girls can make a turnaround, but we're not hopeful. I've never seen anyone get this sick so fast, especially an entire team." "That's why I'm here," Kevin replied. "I've dealt with unexplained illnesses before and thought I might be able to help." "We'll take all the help we can get," Coach Powell replied. "Our opponents, the San Diego Wave, were informed of the potential forfeit and they're probably already popping champagne. Follow me to the infirmary." She led Kevin through the sleek building until they reached the infirmary. Just outside the door, one of the doctors handed Kevin a hazmat suit. "A necessary precaution for now," Coach Powell explained. "We don't know how contagious they are." Kevin entered the room where all 24 players were confirmed to rows of beds. Most looked doubled over in pain, and Kevin could see that many of them were shivering. One of the players spontaneously gagged and vomited into a bucket next to her bed. "They can barely keep any food down," the doctor explained to Kevin. "It's maybe for the best since they're struggling even to stand up to get to the bathroom. The vertigo they're experiencing has been debilitating. But the strangest symptom has been their temperatures, all very low, around 93 degrees. Even keeping them under heated blankets isn't helping." "Can I talk to one of them?" Kevin asked. The doctor led him to the first bed. "Haley McCann, team captain," he said by way of introduction. "Hi, Haley. I'm Kevin Williams," he said, kneeling down next to her bed. "Can you tell me what happened?" Haley pulled her blanket tight around her shoulders. "We thought it was food poisoning at first," she said between shivers. "It started while we were at team lunch during practice yesterday. By the end of the meal, everyone was dizzy and vomiting." "Where did you eat? What did you have?" Kevin asked. "Same as always," Haley replied. "We ate here at the stadium, chicken, rice, and vegetables." "And nothing tasted any different than usual?" Kevin asked. "Not that I could tell," Haley replied. "Thank you, Haley. I'll let you get some rest. You've been very helpful," Kevin said. The doctor escorted Kevin out of the infirmary where Coach Powell was waiting for them. "It's not like any food poisoning I've ever seen," the doctor explained. "Me neither," Kevin agreed. "Do you mind if I did some research here for a bit?" "You can use my office," Coach Powell offered. She led Kevin to her office outside of the team locker room. "Take all the time you need," she said. "It's not like I need to plan out conditioning workouts anytime soon." Kevin sat at her desk and took his herbalism book out of his satchel. "I really hope there's some insight in here," he thought. He flipped to the section on poisons, figuring that was the best place to start. He recited the team's symptoms in his head. Low temperature, shivering, vomiting, vertigo, symptoms formed within an hour of initial exposure. He flipped another page and finally found what he was looking for. "The Hypalion herb," Kevin read. It was flavorless and odorless and caused all the same symptoms if ingested. But Kevin was surprised to read that it was native to South America. How did it get to a soccer stadium in Chicago? He wondered. Kevin knew it couldn't be an accident, but he hated to think the worst right off the bat. He was, after all, an optimist even in the face of what could be strange evidence that indicated foul play. Further down the page, the news was disheartening. If left untreated, the poison from the Hypalion herb could lead to nerve damage, even paralysis. The consequences for these players could be much more severe than missing their next game, Kevin realized. There has to be a cure here. He scanned further down the page and eventually saw that the only known antidote to Hypalion poisoning was the venom from a blue fire ant. I've never even heard of that, Kevin thought. He turned to Coach Powell's computer and Googled the insect. There were hardly any websites to be found, not even a Wikipedia page. The most official-looking source on the subject was from the entomology department at the University of Lima. The page stated that the blue fire ant was native to the Amacua region of Peru, deep in the jungle, and was commonly used as an antidote to poisonous local flora. But then Kevin's face fell. The blue fire ant went extinct in the 1800s, he read. He glanced at his secret books, the ones given to him by the Night King, to figure out how old it actually was. I really need an updated edition of this, he thought. But for now, he was at a dead end. If this page is correct, there is no available cure for these women, Kevin thought. He returned to the Google search and found a link farther down the page titled, "The Secret Survival of the Blue Fire Ant. A Shred of Hope." Kevin clicked the link and found a blog written by a self-professed entomologist named Maria Vasquez. The website didn't exactly look like a professional webmaster had overseen it, and that didn't give Kevin much confidence in the skills of Vasquez. He clicked on the About the Author link and read that Maria was a highly specialized entomologist who had recently gone independent. Kevin knew that this was likely code for losing a research grant from a university or being fired from a private lab or research organization. Her bio claimed that she had been stung by the supposedly extinct blue fire ants as a child, and remained convinced she had correctly identified her persistent attackers due to their distinct indigo pigment and the fact that her childhood asthma spontaneously cured soon after being stung. She had since devoted her life to proving their existence. Kevin could see why whatever organization she worked for in the past might have cut her loose. There wasn't much to be gained from funding a scientist who was only concerned with researching an insect that the rest of the scientific community agreed was extinct. But Maria's childhood memory was now the only hope for the Chicago Red Stars. Kevin exclaimed, "I have to find her." Kevin steps in to try to solve the mysterious illness of all of the players on Chicago's Red Stars women's soccer team. He deduced that their symptoms aligned with poisoning from the hypalion herb, a plant native to Peru. The only known cure was the blue fire ant's venom, though the ants were said to have gone extinct in the 1800s. The only glimmer of hope was from the blog of an entomologist named Maria Vasquez, who was convinced that the insect still existed. Kevin called the number on Maria's website, but it went straight to voicemail. I really hope she's still alive and working in her field, Kevin thought. This hope was confirmed when he looked at her blog entries and saw the most recent one was from only a few days ago. She wrote that she was setting off on a 6-week expedition on the Infierno Verde Trail deep in the jungle outside Iquitos in Peru. Then that's where I'm going, Kevin thought. He quickly called Sandra Wilson, his longtime employee who was able to accomplish seemingly impossible assignments in a matter of minutes, to ask her to book a flight and raced out of Coach Regina Powell's office. Kevin located her and the team doctor outside the infirmary and assured them that he was going to find a cure. Our season depends on it, Coach Powell called after him as he rushed away. It occurred to Kevin that neither of them was aware of how dire the poisoning was and how severe the symptoms could become. There was way more than the season on the line for these women. Kevin called 3 of his most capable underlings, Olivia Rafferty, Kyle Thompson, and Marcus Watford, and told them to meet him at the airport. A few hours later, they were boarding the flight to Iquitos. Kyle and Marcus in particular were buzzing with excitement. It had been a long time since they had gotten to accompany Kevin in one of his missions. After landing, Kevin rented a jeep to take them deep into the jungle to the head of the Infierno Verde Trail. It definitely wasn't the kind of trail one would find in a United States national park. The underbrush was overgrown, and very quickly they discovered footpaths branching off in different directions, which made sticking to the main trail more difficult than expected. Based on her blog posts, Maria had a 3-day head start on them. Didn't help their trek that cell phone service quickly evaporated in the remote terrain. They weren't going to have the benefit of GPS to keep them on track or help them get back. This is going to be harder than finding a needle in a haystack, Olivia observed. Like finding a needle in a jungle, Marcus added. Kevin had to admit that locating Maria certainly wouldn't be easy. She probably wasn't going to be conducting her research on and near the main trail and would likely veer into the wilderness at some point. What we do have going for us is that research expeditions usually move pretty slowly, Kevin assured them. She wouldn't be in a rush while looking for clues to her research. There's a good chance that we can catch up to her. I wish we had the option of an aerial view, Kyle mused. In truth, the canopy cover was far too thick to reveal anything from above. But then Kevin saw a family of howler monkeys swinging through the trees. Maybe we don't need a bird's eye view. A monkey's view might be just enough, Kevin suggested. The group began using the dense jungle gym of branches to swing their way along the trail. It didn't provide much additional visibility, but allowed them to move faster and did allow them a wider view than they had on the ground. "Remind me to do some CrossFit sessions before I do another expedition with you," Olivia said as she launched herself between branches. "Remind me to go on expeditions with you way more often," Marcus added as he whooped in delight while swinging through the trees. Up ahead, Kevin could see a small clearing where what looked like an array of black lines were converging at one spot. He climbed down the closest tree trunk, and as he neared the ground, he discovered that the black lines were actually trails of ants. "This is as good of a lead as any," Kevin said, and Olivia, Marcus, and Kyle joined him on the ground, where they followed the marching ants. The lines of ants eventually converged at a small mound of pulp fruit, almost indistinguishable beneath the swarms of ants enjoying the delectable meal. "None of the wild animals would have left this here," Kevin mused. "This must have been laid here as a trap for the ants." "Exactly," came a woman from the bushes. A woman carrying a notebook and wearing thick khaki hiking gear emerged from the flora. "So I'd appreciate you not disturbing it." "You must be Maria Vasquez," Kevin said excitedly. Against all odds, they seemed to have located the needle in the jungle. "I am," Maria nodded, though her eyes were skeptical. "I can't say I'm exactly used to having fans, let alone ones that would track me this far to find me. You want an autograph?" "I want your expertise," Kevin replied. "My name is Kevin Williams, and I've come here all the way from Chicago. A soccer team has fallen ill, seemingly poisoned by the Hypalian herb. I've learned that the only cure is the blue fire ant, and seeing as how you seem to be the only person alive who believes they exist, you're our only hope of finding them and curing the team." Maria's eyes widened. "So you're a fellow believer," she said, stepping toward him. "Let's just say I'm hopeful that what you claim is true," Kevin responded. "I've read your website. You said you've encountered them before?" "When I was a child," Maria confirmed. "I've been spending my whole life trying to find them again for the very reason you're describing. Their healing properties are well documented. With all of the medical advancements made in the past 150 years since they were more abundant, the ants could be the key to finding antidotes to countless poisons and maladies. Their stings hurt like hell, but it was well worth it. In all my research, I've never found evidence of another insect that could have cured my asthma. I know it was the blue fire ants." "But no one believes you?" Kevin asked. "Not enough to continue funding my research," Maria lamented. "At best, they think I'm remembering my experience as a child incorrectly. At worst, they think I'm about as credible of a scientist as someone who claims the Earth is flat and was created 6,000 years ago. But no matter how many traps I set, I can never seem to attract any blue fire ant specimens." "How did you find them the first time?" Kevin asked. "Completely by accident," Maria replied. "I was climbing trees and fell right on top of a mound of them." "Well, we'll do whatever we can to help you find them again," Kevin explained. "If left uncured, the poison from the Hypalian herb could leave the women in Chicago paralyzed." "It's a women's soccer team? I didn't know that was even legal. It's been a long time since I was part of a regular society," Maria said. "I must say I've become quite used to working alone. It might be a nice change of pace to have some assistance." "What can we do to help?" Kevin asked. "Well, I guess the best thing," Maria began, but then she was interrupted by an anteater approaching the mound of ants. "Hey, get away from there!" Maria yelled, trying to shoo the anteater away. "Wait!" Kevin implored her. Using his ability to communicate with animals, he telepathically asked the anteater if he had ever come across the blue fire ants. As Maria watched Kevin silently staring at the anteater, she asked Olivia, "What is he doing?" "Oh, he's communicating with the anteater," Olivia replied. "And they say I'm a quack," Maria said. Meanwhile, the anteater was excitedly engaging in conversation with Kevin.
"The blue fire ants? What a delicacy!" the anteater exclaimed.
I've only come across them once, my most delicious meal of my life, even if they weren't that great on my stomach afterward. You know where I could find some?" "We were hoping you would be able to lead us to them," Kevin explained. "Where were you when you found them the first time?" "Might as well have been heaven," the anteater replied. "It was a walled city deep in the jungle. I somehow managed to sneak in and there was a whole mound of ants inside. I was thrown outside the walls as soon as I was discovered and haven't been able to find the city since. I could have sworn I remembered where it was, but it's like it vanished. I've been trying to find those ants again ever since." "You're not the only one," Kevin replied. Suddenly, it clicked together. A tribe living within a walled city deep within the jungle? It had to be the Nuxmaks. Kevin and his team tracked outcast entomologist Maria Vasquez deep into the Peruvian jungle where Kevin hoped to learn about supposedly extinct blue fire ants from her. Maria was eager to have an ally in her quest to prove to the world that the ants were still in existence, but it was from an anteater with whom Kevin communed that he heard about a walled city in which the anteater had found the ants. Kevin realized the fabled location had to be the capital dwelling of the Nuxmaks. Kevin relayed this revelation to the group. "The ants are within the walled city of the Nuxmaks. I recognized the description from what the anteater told me." "The who? The what? The anteater told you?" Maria exclaimed. "What in the Indiana Jones are you talking about? If there was a walled city within the jungle, I'm pretty sure I would know about it." "They have ways of keeping it hidden," Kevin explained. "They're far more advanced than the typical isolated indigenous tribe, and they've been able to keep their city undetected by modern explorers." "So how do you know about it?" Maria asked. "I stumbled upon them by accident after my plane crashed in the Amazon," Kevin explained. Maria turned to Olivia. "Who is this guy?" "You haven't even scratched the surface," Olivia replied dryly. "All right, well, do you know how to find it?" Maria asked. "I know where it was in the past," Kevin replied. "It would take about a day to get there from here. We may find added obstacles once we get there, but for now, it's the best place to start." "Then let's go back to my camp," Maria suggested, indicating that she was now ready to seize on Kevin's belief that the ants could be found in a fabled tribal location. In Maria's mind, the crazy assertion was worth the risk of being nothing more than a folly if it meant that she would, at last, have proof of the blue fire ant's existence. "We should load up on supplies, and I have access to quicker means of travel." They walked about an hour through the jungle until they came upon Maria's canvas tent camp set up along a riverbank. A frazzled-looking young man popped up from the collapsible chair where he had been waiting. "Did you find what you're looking for? Can we head back now?" he asked. Maria rolled her eyes towards Kevin. "This is my assistant Dario. He much prefers staying in the lab rather than trekking into the deep recesses of the jungle with me," she explained. Next, a rugged-looking man emerged from one of the tents holding a rifle. "Did you find what we're looking for? Are we heading deeper into the jungle?" he asked hopefully. "My jungle guide Miguel," Maria said to Kevin. "This camp is a little too much civilization for him. You may be in luck, Miguel," she called, turning to him. "Have you ever heard of the walled city of the Nuxmaks?" Miguel approached skeptically. "I've heard of it, never believed it though," he replied. "If it existed, I'm sure I would have found it by now." "I've seen it," Kevin replied. "I can assure you it's real. And it's the most likely place for us to find the blue fire ants." "So you're planning on proving a whole slew of legends at once," Miguel observed. "Sounds too good to be true, but if it gets us trekking deep into the jungle, I'm certainly not going to object." Dario groaned, indicating that he would very much like to object. Maria woke up her boat captain, who was napping in his motorized dinghy parked along the shore. "Jorge, we're going on a trip," she announced. Kevin, Maria, Olivia, Marcus, Kyle, Miguel, and Dario all piled into the dinghy. Kevin directed Jorge down the river, instructing him to veer off into some of the smaller tributaries. Finally, Kevin told Jorge to pull along the bank at a seemingly random spot. "We'll head due east from here," Kevin explained. I have to advise against going this deep into the jungle, Jorge said. Even for the most experienced explorers, this is off of the grid. No one knows what wildlife inhabits an area this remote. There's no way you're going to survive in there. Jorge has a point. Maybe we should turn back, Dario suggested as his voice quivered. Dario, you're my assistant. I need your assistance, Maria insisted, as Dario looked like he was severely regretting his career path. Jorge, wait for us here, Maria instructed. The group followed Kevin into the jungle. I should warn you all, Kevin began. The Nooksmaks are protective and defensive people and will likely cross paths with them before we reach the city. Let me do the talking, otherwise they might attack. Let them try, Miguel replied, cocking his shotgun. Please, keep that down, Kevin pleaded. Just trust me on this one. As they continued through the forest, the underbrush became thicker and denser. Be careful not to step on any snakes, Kevin advised. Dario whimpered as he changed his gait to a tiptoe. Suddenly, Dario tripped a wire and a net popped up from the ground, trapping all of them inside and hoisting them into the air. The group squirmed within the tight quarters. Olivia, you're stepping on my hand, Marcus complained. Not much I can do about that right now, Olivia replied. The group was quickly surrounded by a group of Nooksmaks warriors. At first glance, they seemed like a stereotypically primitive Amazon tribe, but upon closer glance, their armor looked far more sophisticated, and their spears seemed to carry an electrical current. The leader of the warriors stepped forward. We'll give you the benefit of the doubt that this encroachment on our land was a mistake, he said. If you leave here and never speak a word of what you saw, we'll cut you down. If you can't agree to these terms, we'll have no choice but to kill you. Yep, we'll leave, Dario yelled frantically. But Kevin recognized the voice of the warrior leader. He had previously defeated him in a battle in order to prove himself to the Nooksmaks during his last encounter. Crouching Jaguar? Kevin asked. The warrior lowered his spear as he peered at Kevin through the ropes of the net. His eyes widened. Kevin Williams, he exclaimed. Well, I'll be damned, Maria muttered quietly. This man has already proven himself to us, Crouching Jaguar said to his fellow warriors. Cut them down. The warriors did as told, and the group sighed with relief as their feet touched the forest floor. Marcus nursed his crushed hand, but Miguel wasn't so ready to play nice. You think you can ambush us and just get away with it? He yelled. He raised his rifle, but quick as lightning, two of the warriors subdued him, removed his weapon, and bound his wrists with the rope from the net. Kevin, you better do something about this, Miguel yelled as he squirmed against the ropes. Sorry about him, Kevin said to Crouching Jaguar. I tried to warn him that he needed to play nice. What brings you here? Crouching Jaguar asked, especially with someone like that. We're in search of the blue fire ants, and we were advised that they may only exist inside your walled city, Kevin explained. There's a group of women back in Chicago who have fallen ill, and the venom from the blue fire ant is probably their only cure. Not to mention everyone thinks I'm crazy for believing they still exist, Maria interjected. Can you help us? Kevin asked. Crouching Jaguar thought it over. Finally, he shared, It's true that we have been keeping the blue fire ants alive for centuries. They keep our tribe healthy and play an important role in our coming-of-age ceremony. But back when the city dwellers could find them, they used them up with a lack of care for their survival. The blue fire ants almost went extinct, and it's only due to our protection that they've survived. If you allow us access to the ants, I can assure you their location will remain secret, Kevin assured him. But my research, Maria protested. You can prove they still exist, but Crouching Jaguar is right. They can't be endangered again, Kevin replied. Knowing that his old friend Kevin was trustworthy, Crouching Jaguar said, I'll bring you to Paradiso, our capital city, to meet with our chief Tanabuk. He will ultimately decide if you can have the ants. Crouching Jaguar shot a suspicious glance at Miguel. But he is staying cuffed. Kevin agreed to these terms, and surrounded by the warriors, the group was led by Crouching Jaguar through the jungle. Crouching Jaguar slowed to a stop at a spot that looked no different than the rest of the jungle surrounding it.
"Here we are," Crouching Jaguar announced.
Where?" Kyle asked. "Is your whole city in that tree?" Crouching Jaguar smirked and touched his spear to the tree trunk. Suddenly, the air in front of them rippled as if an electric current were running through it. The Nooksmek's concealment technology lifted as glittering golden walls were revealed before them. Other than Kevin, the group's jaws dropped.
"Welcome," Crouching Jaguar said proudly, "to Paradiso."